All right, dudes, welcome back. Another Pangburn hangout here. Today's topic, 12 rules and 12 more from Jordan Peterson. I want to know what you guys think of Jordan's 12 Rules for Life book, of course, and what you anticipate or what you've experienced so far with 12 more rules. I'll do a bit of reading of 12 rules to prompt some discussion today, but I want to get your guys' general take on Peterson and whether you like this this rules model, this kind of rules to abide by. I prefer the refining fundamental mechanisms approach as opposed to this list of rules. I think it overcomplicates things in general. But I want to know how you guys feel about it and what your experiences have been so far. I'm just going to jump into the voice chat room here on Discord, and we'll get all fired up. Of course, if you want to join the conversation on Discord, you can by subscribing or becoming a member of our Discord server. So I'm going to go, just going to create the invite here. Delta, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. Nice to hear from you, Trav.
Yeah, you too.
I actually got the second book in the duology. I haven't started reading it yet. It's on the to-do list.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. Now, just in general, what did you think of 12 Rules for Life? I'm pretty sure you've taken it in, right?
Yeah. To be honest, it's been a while since I've read the first one. I remember that I liked it.
I know it's hard it's hard to recall some of these books if you haven't read them, taking them in a couple times or did some study with them. I get that. It happens to me with a lot of books I read. Let's talk about. Well, I'm going to do a bit of. Let me look at my notes here. I'm just going to pull out my book. Let's go to chapter 1. Let's see what. Okay, rule 1: stand up straight with your shoulders back. Do you remember that, Delta? That chapter?
Yeah, that's the lobster one. That was I like that one because it's literal as much as it's metaphorical, and that's true for all the rules. But it's not just saying have good posture, although that is important. And he kind of makes a point of talking about how your posture is linked to your psychology, and your psychology is linked to your posture, and it's kind of a feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part of it, but there's also just the part like, hey, forthrightly confront the world, and I like that too.
Right. Well, let me do a quick reading from the neurochemistry of defeat and victory section here from that chapter.
Totally.
A lobster loser's brain chemistry differs importantly from what of a lobster winner. This is reflected in their relative postures. Whether a lobster is confident or cringing depends on the ratio of two chemicals that modulate communication between lobster neurons, serotonin and octopamine. Winning increases the ratio of the former to the latter. A lobster with high levels of serotonin and low levels of, and I think it's pronounced octopamine, is a cocky, strutting sort of shellfish, much less likely to back down when challenged. That sounds a lot like me. This is because serotonin, by the way, that was an aside. This is because serotonin helps regulate postural flexion. A flexed lobster extends its appendages so that it can look tall and dangerous, like Clint Eastwood in a spaghetti western. I have to read that again. A flexed lobster extends its appendages. That's what she said. uh,
Nice.
so that it can look tall and dangerous, like Clint Eastwood. Yeah, interesting. When a lobster that has just lost a battle is exposed to serotonin, it will stretch itself out, advance even on former victors, and fight longer and harder. So this, I like it when we. I think that all life fundamentally is operating under this same mechanism that is yet to be either well defined or described, which I would say it has been known so far as consciousness. And I think we are all connected at that fundamental level. It's essentially kind of what the law of life is. And I think that's why we can look across certain species and crustaceans even and see ourselves in them. And I think that's and if you go even deeper, let's say the first self-replicating cell molecule, the nucleotide, you can even see some kind of drive happening in that I think we can relate to, which is pretty cool. I think it's just the fundamental, law of life, which is yet to be theorized in a mathematical way or a demonstrable way, I guess. So that's some of the lobster bit. What do you? I just want to ask you, Delta, and we'll get other people as well. Looks like we got Yoga Bag Howl in the room. Yoga, welcome. Delta, what do you think of this idea of approaching the human condition with rules as opposed to focusing on the fundamental mechanisms?
So I'm of two minds, and I think I know what you mean by fundamental mechanism. I think fundamental mechanism might be more precise. And for people who think philosophy often and like talk about this stuff, I think it might be the better option. However, and this is not me putting down the general population. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm saying is that the general population doesn't have the luxury of thinking about this stuff as much. And I think having rules you conform to because they're rules is a very, very practical and effective way of managing your life instead of having to like ruminate on things regularly. I enjoy ruminating personally, but I have the luxury of being able to ruminate, and not everybody has that. So I like the rules approach. I think for the average person, it simplifies things. I think it doesn't allow you to squirm as much.
Yeah.
Because if you're thinking fundamental theorem, you're philosophizing with yourself, and then you have like the little voices in the back of your head that are also getting their say in, like maybe swaying your better judgment because whatever your better judgment is saying is unpleasant. But with rules, it's just no, this is the rules, and you have to follow them, and that's it. And there's obviously the potential for dogma there, but it also makes things more absolute, harder to squirm out of, and probably more practical and effective and simple for the average human. So I like the way he presents it.
Okay.
Although I might agree with you, for philosophers, fundamental principle might be a little bit more accurate.
Well, I think there's a way, and this is the argument I'll make in my first book, because originally I was going to release my pleasure drive theory first, and then my attempt at the theory of everything. But I agree with you on your initial premise that, and I think you're being a little too kind to the general public. But I would like to say that in general, they don't know how to think. They just know, they know, in general, they know a little bit of what to think, and then the rest of it is kind of their survival mechanism carving out their life for them, which it's fine and dandy to get through through the basics of life. And most people live in the basics, right? The pursuit, the pursuit of a career, the pursuit of a relationship, the pursuit of children. But I think there's a way to colloquialize the mechanisms in such a way that a 12-year-old should be able to read my book on mechanisms and understand it. That's kind of my dream, and it would focus more on like, how do you determine what is going on? How what is your moral foundation, or what's your relationship with morality? What are the things that inspire you? You know, those things, and then have skepticism obviously sitting at the top, keeping track of it all. So I guess what I'm saying is I can come up with this like 4-point system with this mechanism of skepticism looking over it. But Jordan Peterson's going the other route in saying, I'm going to use analogy, metaphor, and also engaging with the is findings of the scientific method, and come up with these colloquialized things that people can relate to, and also at the same time showing our relation to other species, like in the lobster example. I think what he does is powerful, but I'm not sure if it's the, like, you know what I would like to see from Jordan, and this is kind of how I felt after 12 Rules for Life, and I have not yet read 12 more, but I would like to see Jordan write a very short book focusing on the mechanisms of how he determines what is going on in reality, which I believe he does that through the scientific method. And then
he's spoken on that a lot.
Yeah. And then, because Jordan, let's face it, Jordan is a scientist, and people will be like, Jordan believes in a fairy god. And no, he doesn't. Jordan's, as far as I'm concerned, based on what Jordan believes with regards to God, he is an atheist. And he may not want to wear that label, just like someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't want to wear it because they think there's some negative connotation there, where people think that you're adopting the positive claim that there are no gods, which atheism is not, at least in the way that I use it, and almost anyone I've ever met uses it. So yeah, and I want to bring Yoga in next. Yoga, how's it going today? If Yoga's available to speak. Maybe they're not. Oh, okay. There we go.
Buddy.
Hey,
sorry,
Yoga.
I'm just passively listening.
Yeah,
Yo Gabagool is the name. It's okay.
Yo Gabagool. Okay, I like it.
It's an Office reference.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'll have the Gabagool.
Yep, exactly.
The Office is.
I was just listening.
Game.
I've been trying to form an opinion on Jordan Peterson for a while now. I think my algorithm on my computer and the information I get leans liberal, so it's really hard to figure it out. My boyfriend is obviously a big Jordan Peterson fan. I feel very I find him off-putting.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe it's because I watch The Handmaid's Tale too often, but he reminds me of the guy from Handmaid's Tale, and I'm 80% sure if he could choose between this reality or the Handmaid's Tale reality, he would choose there. But I'm hoping, I just came to, hear the other side and try to understand what people like about him so much.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I like what you said, and it was interesting that you said, well, my boyfriend obviously is a Jordan Peterson fan. Now let's delve into that a little bit. Do you think that it would be strange to come across a man who isn't a Jordan Peterson fan?
It seems clear that his audience is just younger white males.
Oh, really? Okay, well, I'll give you one thing to think about, and then we'll jump in to see what Sean has to say. When I produce these events with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, we took huge photographs of the people who attended the live events, and obviously the live event audiences aren't necessarily going to be the be all to end all of what demographic are buying the books, of course, but the racial diversity, the sexual diversity in the audience, the sexual orientation diversity, lots of gay people as well coming to enjoy Jordan's lectures, and also ideological diversity, I would say, based on the conversations that were happening, in the audience, interviews that were taking place. So on this Discord alone, we have probably, I would say, a quarter of our Discord, maybe 35% is are black people. And most of them, I would say, have found some positivity in Jordan's work one way or another, and they would call themselves fans of that. But you know, that narrative of Jordan kind of speaking to the the white cis male, I'm not sure it's true. And but it very well may be the majority of those who are buying the book, and we would have to do a poll to see if that was the case.
Be interesting to look at. I'm in Seattle, so I live in a bubble.
Right.
No, I don't think if I were to ask any of my female friends who he was, I don't think any of them
right
would know him. Where my white guys that I play racquetball with love him. Like it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
I live in a bubble. I'm totally
I hear what you're
open
saying.
to that.
Yeah,
but it just feels like anytime I'm a big Sam Harris fan, so I watched their things, but just trying to suss Jordan out, when I try to just figure out what his arguments are, it seems like I have to go into this wormhole of
totally
5 hour. It's it's not very clear. It seems like he kind of purposefully he'll allude to things but not say it. So it's just really hard to suss him out as a person and what his beliefs and his arguments are.
Right, and what you're saying isn't far off from what the general consensus of the Sam Harris fans have to say about Jordan's thought pretzel thinking, because Jordan is a thought pretzel thinker. He's not an authored thinker the way Sam Harris is, where Sam Harris is going to deliver as though he is authored this for the page and it could go straight into his next book when he speaks. Whereas Jordan Peterson, you got to go with him on this journey through the thought pretzel. Now, I love thought pretzel thinkers. They're very interesting to me. But I take your point definitely. When it comes to clarity of information, delivering the information, trying to get to to get him to commit to an actual answer for something he finds very difficult and that he must explain to the full extent, you're not going to get a short answer from Jordan, that's for sure. And I will say, in my experience of having dinner with Jordan, that guy, there is no simple answer for him. And I think that has to do with the way he thinks and conceptualizes reality and makes it work in metaphor. So I'll leave you with that for a second. I want to bring Sean in. Sean, I know you're probably the most diehard Jordan Peterson fan out there. One of them. First, let's get your take on 12 Rules for Life and this style of rule writing for humanity, as opposed to maybe focusing on the fundamental mechanisms of skepticism, science, reason.
Well, it's interesting. It's funny you call me a Jordan Peterson fan. I would say I'm more of a student than a fan, because, through Jordan, I've worked backwards. I've stopped that. But as far as the conceptualizations of the rule writing, it's a best way of navigating how to get your life together in a way that's going to work, in a way that works for people outside of the classroom. And it's a way of taking maps of meaning and making maps of meaning more accessible to the general public as well.
Yeah, and do you think Jordan's writing is accessible, clear for the colloquialized enough? Because Jordan's got a deep breadth of linguistic skills and IQ, so it's a lot of his material is quite thick, and it is coming from a thought pretzel thinker, so it's very robust and deeply engaged in. Do you think that's a good way to communicate to the general public?
It worked out much better this time around than with Maps of Meaning. Maps of Meaning, I had to go back and read 4 or 5 different authors just to understand that.
Yeah.
So I think it does work out better.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's look at. I'm just flipping through one of my 12 Rules copies right now. What's your favorite piece, Sean, in 12 Rules for Life? We will get into the the implications and the nuance of Beyond Order. But what are some things that really stand out to you? We already went through the lobster example, so maybe something beside that of, a piece of importance you took out of 12 Rules for Life.
Just say the two things that stuck with me is, one, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. I think that's something that everybody needs to work on.
You read my mind, mate. I'm not going to interrupt you, but that's
and I would say the second one that I would say that stuck out is the pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, which means that, there's a lot of temptation to just do what you think is going to get you through right now at the moment, but sometimes just following your impulse at that moment doesn't work out for you, so you kind of need to stop, slow down, think about things, and figure out, well, what's going to be more worthwhile rather than just what's going to feel good at that exact moment.
Right. I'm just going to invite the rest of the Discord. We are live. Talking Jordan Peterson. Do you have a signed book, Sean?
No, I don't. I got mine, I got my copy of 12 Rules for Life after the Kathy Newman interview, so I think that was like a month or two after the book had come out.
Yeah.
but no, none of my books are signed, but if Jordan feels well enough and plans on, talking and comes near here, I'll probably go and try to get my books signed, but, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be disappointed if he ends up, spending this year and part of the next trying to recover.
Well, last I heard from Jordan, he's feeling about 20%, which it's an improvement from 1%. How he was feeling, in the medical induced coma. But
yeah, we would rather have Jordan at 100% or, better than 20.
Right. Well, and I would even argue that even when he was at his peak popularity, when 12 Rules was just taking over the intellectual market, I would say we were probably getting him at 80%. I'm not convinced that we've had Jordan at 100%. I don't think his mental health allows him to be, and I can very much sympathize with that. Like, crippling clinical depression. That's a spot where Jordan and I connected a lot on, like, having some discussions, and I think it robs you of that extra 20%, and it's a carrot that you're never going to catch. And if I had to make a bet, I would say we will never see a mind like Jordan at 100%. And that's, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's it's a sick, nasty reality of the human brains, especially when we get up way past the average IQ. The sympathetic nervous system functioning at way too high of level, the parasympathetic nervous system basically off the map, not even responding. And you get this feeling like you're being tortured your entire life. It's hard to be 100% at that. But if your inspirations are in tune, like Jordan's a fucking inspired guy. His inspirations are there. It allows us to at least enjoy the work at 80%. I just want to invite Quack Attack, quack, quack, quack. How's it going, buddy?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Josh for 2000, welcome. Glad you're here. Glad you're with us. Let's do a mic check. I think Josh Fur's maybe one of those guys that doesn't. Maybe he hasn't spoken with us yet. For those of you on YouTube, please join us on Discord for this discussion. We'll probably keep this live and running all day, so feel free. If you can't jump in now, jump in later. I just gave you guys the Discord link. So let's talk about you brought up the section on lying. Now, and I'll throw this to the room. Let's just have a general discussion on that. I have major disagreements with Sam Harris's book on lying. I don't think that should be an absolute rule, and I'll give you guys my hypothetical. Say me as an atheist, I don't see any good reason to believe that there's any afterlife. I'm not going to make the positive claim that there isn't any, but I see no good reason to believe that. And let's say in this hypothetical, my daughter is, she's gone through her last bout of chemotherapy, and the doctors have said, she's only got a couple days to live at this point. And I'm spending those last couple days with my daughter, and she's like, Daddy, am I going to get to see you and my brother again in heaven? My friend told me about heaven. Do I get to see you again? And is that where Grandma is? Is Grandma going to be waiting for me up there? And is it going to be a fun, magical place? I think my moral foundation, maximizing well-being for myself and those around me, actually gives me reasonable justification to go along with the fantasy and not tell the truth of what I actually fundamentally believe in that situation, for the reason of preserving as much well-being for my child and giving them as much comfort before they die. And now that's not to say I don't think, people should apply that hypothetical generally across the board and just go around lying. But I think people, if someone was to sit there and say in my situation, or like if I was to say, no, I have no good reason to believe that, and I don't think it's actually real, or when there's really just 2 days or 3 days left for her to live, when it's not going to be as comforting of an idea. I think that would be immoral for me to tell the truth in that moment. And I'll pass that around and see what you guys think about that.
I strong disagree with that.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear.
I think you're not giving your daughter the opportunity to enjoy the last days of her life with you to the fullest by lying to her. She won't understand the preciousness of the moment, that this is the last time she's ever going to see you. And it robs meaning away from the moment. It's this is the last time we're going to be with each other. So, let's just take this all in,
So I'll respond with one little question, Josh.
Yeah.
Meaning for her or for you? Because let's add, this hypothetical. When I said daughter, let's say 3, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, at that age, understanding the those concepts that you just laid out, those functions may or may not be there, right?
Maybe, I guess. I think if you had a daughter and you told her that, hey, this is the last time we're going to see each other, I think
do you think she has the tools? And I'll let you go, Josh. But I want to say, do you think she has the tools? If you were to tell her how you absolutely felt about it, do you think she has the tools to adopt that constructively and apply it the way you said that she could possibly apply it? Or do you think it's gonna cause her a significant amount of dread in her past couple days, and add to her fear towards death?
I can't answer that. I have no idea.
Yeah.
How
Mine.
you're going, but like,
yeah.
I don't know.
So I guess when I come up with a general rule like that, there of course in morality, because all of our systems are subjective as far as I'm concerned, there are going to be ways to find hypotheticals where you would say, okay, you have, let's say you have a daughter who's 25, right? And she she understands that you may have a difference of belief, and maybe that's part of that's part of it. But even in those situations, like if you think of the trauma that a lot of people go through when they're reaching the end of their life and they can kind of feel it coming, it's the existential dread is at its thickest in those moments. I just wanted to bring in Delta. Delta, it sounded like you were potentially in agreement with Josh.
Trav, I'm actually on your side in terms of the hypothetical. Well, I was saying yeah to like what you were gonna say. I don't think that you need to do away with the rule to allow for the exception. I think it is like you can bring up the hypothetical of Anne Frank, like Nazis knock on your door and ask, yo, is there a Jewish girl in your attic? If you say yes, it's because you're an immoral person. Right. If you're selling out the 8-year-old to the Nazis. However, that doesn't mean that the rule of always do your best to tell the truth, or at least don't lie, should be thrown out.
And
like
I agree.
The fundamental,
I totally agree. And I worry when people take Sam Harris's book Lying. I don't know if Yoga's read it. Yoga's a fan of Sam Harris, but they take Sam Harris's book Lying and they apply it as this absolute rule. I've actually heard people try to defend it in this Discord, and I worry that would lead them to, approaching these serious situations that ought to be taken with due seriousness. And potentially will be acting immoral because they think that this rule ought to be absolute as opposed to a general rule. Because I agree, at a general rule, as a general moral rule, definitely.
Yeah, well, it's really this really leads into something interesting, because I understand the knee-jerk reaction to just defend the rules set forth by people that you idolize, because when you don't have rules and you're trying to make your way based on your best judgment, I've been dealing with this personally. It's like, how do you know that your judgments aren't merely arbitrary? So I understand the knee-jerk reaction to try to find absolute rules. And I also think the knee-jerk reaction that often occurs, you set up an exception. You set up a hypothetical to where the rule might not apply. And whoever's defending the rule's validity, and it's validity is the best word for it, the rule's usefulness, is going to always fight against that hypothetical, because they're thinking a step ahead, saying, now you're going to use this hypothetical. If I agree, then you're going to say the whole rule's garbage. And they're just kind of assuming where you're going. And I don't think that I understand that reaction, but I don't think it's right. And it's like it is important not to lie. Jordan, and I haven't read Harris's book, but I'd imagine he'd talk about it. It's like you, on some level, you're warping your own reality if you lie enough about something, and you really don't want to do that.
Sure.
But yes, there are exceptions, even though it's a good general rule. The knee jerks against the exceptions are born out of a fear that the exception will eat the rule, essentially.
Right.
And I think it's important to stave off that type of knee jerk defense.
Great. Let's jump to Quack Attack. Quack Attack, what do you think about what Delta just said there? Or about this this general topic of lying in general? Okay, we'll move from Quack Attack to Yoga. What do you think about what you're hearing?
I haven't read that book by Sam Harris yet. I was scrolling through and trying to get the highlights here. It seems like what what I know of Sam's character to be would just be like, don't lie to avoid conflict. So when we're lying to young kids with cancer or our grandmas, we're not avoiding conflict. We're just avoiding pain and suffering. But I think people depend on lying to get out of uncomfortable social situations or a conflict that if we just went through it and practiced, we would, I think, see more growth and have a healthier society.
Yeah,
100%.
I think as a general rule, it's brilliant. The problem is if someone interprets that cancer situation with the child, the hypothetical I set up, as another one of those, social things that one could argue that we're avoiding by just telling a lie to our dying child, I think that's where that book ought not be applied. And unfortunately, I see a lot of Sam Harris fans and readers apply it, and I think it's actually an immoral idea to apply it in those situations. Sean, what do you think about the implications of lying? Thinking about Peterson, how he talked about it in Beyond Order, versus potentially how, I don't know if you've read Lying by Sam Harris, but kind of basically what everyone's saying. What do you think about that and the hypothetical as well?
Well, I remember we were discussing tell the truth or don't lie. At one point, you ran us through the same hypothetical, and I always said, I don't know, because It's a truthful answer, but you're not cutting the legs out from under your kid either.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a valid point, that a lot of people do tend to rely on not telling the truth to get out of conflict and not dealing with things that probably would be best to deal with in the immediate, rather than let it fester in the long term, because that can lead to resentment, and that's not good. And you can make the case for not wanting to engage in conflict. There's a trait called agreeableness, and agreeable people really do not like conflict, like at all.
Oh yeah, no,
but
they will
again.
They're the people that will, like, even if they have a scientific worldview, if they're sitting at a table with someone who, has a, let's say, anti-scientific belief that the Earth is 6,000 years old, if someone has a high enough level of agreeableness, they'll just be like, yeah, that's valid.
or they just won't say anything at all and just be like,
exactly.
Okay, well, we're just going to let you do that. And so I think really you have to take care to not say something that's blatantly false, but you're not sticking to that's where you get into the white lie, black truth problem too, which, it is what it is. And, our social world is extremely complex, and kind of one of those things that you try to do the best you can given the circumstance at any given point in time.
Mm-hmm.
The right way of thinking about that.
I think the exceptions, like for example, lying to your daughter in her last moments of life, are so rare that it's probably better to think that there are no exceptions. Because if you open the door, then you might like abuse that. In moments where you feel tempted to lie, you might abuse that.
Yeah,
but that's just the problem with that is that would be just a scientifically, or it would be a morally incorrect statement to make, that in no case should you lie. I think that's just that would just feed ignorance. I think the skeptic position ought to be
it depends.
Always we should try.
Look, it depends if you're a moral realist or a pragmatist.
Well, every ought question is going to have to run through your morality, definitely. So of course it will depend on what one's moral foundation. But I'm making a moral argument for this hypothetical. And if you have a different set of or if you have a different moral foundation, then you're obviously well, you're potentially going to disagree.
I guess my point is subjectively on a day-to-day basis, I leave the door closed. Perhaps when I'm having a kind of rational discussion like we are now, I'll open the door because that's, whatever. But generally, I leave the door closed. It's like a rule that I follow. And I think it's better that way.
I understand that.
So I would argue that having closed doors like this is actually the enemy of skepticism. I think you need to be moving towards opening all your doors and allowing your mechanism to interact with what is really going on, and allowing your morality to massage its way through all the things. And you don't need these absolute rules for life to be governing you through it.
Well, I agree. Like if we're having like a philosophical discussion, sure, leave the doors open. But on a day-to-day basis, I think it's better to not risk lying and being not being, I guess, judicious enough in your application of rules. It's better to just leave the door closed, because you might just risk lying when you shouldn't have lied.
And Delta, you were trying to get in there?
Yeah, this is really interesting because we mentioned it when we were alone in the room. This kind of plays in. So, Trav, I think you're right, but you have to be very confident in your ability to run things through your moral foundation. You have to be confident in yourself. Yes. You have to have a ton of it. And I know I personally do not have enough confidence in my own judgment. I have opinions, but I try to stick to neutral principles best I can. Yep. I've been having a bit of a crisis of conscience over that lately because I've recognized that, hey, these neutral principles don't always work. Yep. So I've been thinking about that a lot, which is interesting coincidence. So I understand.
Yeah, I'm having a purely reflection of what I wish ought to be within every human being, and you guys are mixing in a bit of is in there, which is cool. Like we can do that.
Sure.
Like of what humanity is, and trying to avoid danger or something like that. I'm just speaking of perhaps my idea of a utopian goal for managing the mind.
100%.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. 100%. If you didn't have the looming risk of self-sabotage,
sure,
your baser instincts messing with your judgment and all that stuff, if you didn't have to think about that, I do agree that any hard fast rule is to be avoided. But the benefit of the hard fast rule is it shuts the door on some of your less logical impulses, I guess would be the benefit.
Sure.
In the world.
Yeah, so what you're actually bringing up is essentially talking about how emotions may fuck up how the skepticism is interacting, and I think if we're going to apply this to how humanity is now, it's hard to find someone who knows how to think properly. It's really hard, even in the intellectual realm and field. Someone who I would say has a solid foundation in skepticism, it's difficult to find.
Given that you have to factor in emotions into the equation, that you're going to feel emotions. Well, if kind of lying to yourself is going to facilitate the probability that you will act in the best way, then you should lie to yourself. So that's, I guess, where my pragmatism comes in, which is like, if closing the door to the exceptions, which is, I guess, a form of lying, if that is going to facilitate the best kind of moral outcome, then you should do that.
So you're okay with lying to yourself as long as the output is more moralistic than if you weren't? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
It's not even lying to myself. It is a kind of redefinition of truth that the kind that Jordan does, which is, if it's a fiction that is maybe not scientifically true, but that is useful, then that fiction is true. That would be the Jordan Peterson redefinition of truth, and which is one that I agree with. That I don't like. There's like like I can't, I don't know how to like I understand. There's like the like I so we can talk about like the exceptions to the rules of like don't lie. We can talk about the exceptions like in like an abstract conversation. But like when I'm acting in the world, I'm okay. I'm okay living in a different paradigm, moral paradigm. So I'm not a moral objectivist. I'm a pragmatist.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone's ever demonstrated that any moral anything is objective. Um, and I don't want to get into the general conversation about morality because it could probably dominate this whole thing for sure. But we do talk about morality a lot on this channel for anyone that's listening. If you like having conversations about morality, objectiveness, subjectiveness, we do have those conversations a lot. We also have conversations on hard sciences here as well. So if you're a hard science buff, you like talking about elementary particle physics, questions like will we ever find the hypothetical graviton? Will we ever be able to measure it? Does it actually exist? Are we misreading what gravity is? We have those conversations all the time on here, so I hope you guys subscribe. By the way, for everyone listening, we are moving these live discussions over to our new channel, the Pangburn Offensive, it's called. I'm going to drop the link in the YouTube chat for you guys, but please head over there and subscribe, or you are going to miss these live discussions as they go live on YouTube. So please head over there. This is all to do with trying to work with YouTube so that we can get the original channel remonetized, because for some reason YouTube has decided that we are like the most evil channel out there, worse than I've made a list, but there's thousands of channels still monetized that are way more edgy than we are. We basically have conversations like this. So but anyways, please do subscribe to the new channel, the Pangburn Offensive. Thank you, Alexander, moderator, for dropping that link. Thanks a lot. So, what about the new book, Sean? What do you know so far about the new book? I think you're reading through it right now, correct?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of chapter 2, which is imagine who you could be and aim single-mindedly at that. And I finished rule 1, which was do not senselessly denigrate social institutions or artistic achievement. And
right.
The first rule is, it makes a pretty damn good case of what Jordan has said about why you kind of need your social institutions to fall back on, because they can guide you when you're way out in the domain of where you don't know what the hell is going on, versus when you do know what's going on. But also, creative achievement, those are the things that kind of reinvigorate the structure, and you shouldn't carelessly make harsh, undue criticisms for that as well, because you have to have revitalization as well as you have to have some sort of tradition. That's kind of what keeps society stable.
Yeah.
And to pair one or the other needlessly, there's a danger in that. And I think that's absolutely true.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Nivik. Welcome.
The thing about that is when you have social institutions that are conformable norms and you have something new coming along, that is a problem, because that will be viewed through the lens of being an other without taking in fact and logic and understanding in order to not perceive that as a threat. So you could look at the real issues that are of the problem. Like with the Black Plague, people viewed that it was the tolerance of others within society in God punishing them as the real problem. And people who are scientific, who are about fact and logic, were attacked. And that not being the case, it was more about how you feel and thinking through your emotions. So it made people irrationally think in a way of, yes, at that time, at a specific time, in maintaining society, yes, but sometimes times change and new things come about. And you know what I mean? in certain instances of time, thinking that way, it would be useful in maintaining order. But that's not definite. You know what I mean? Times change, and you're going to have to be able to adapt to those changes. And
so Nivek,
so being factual.
Nivek, just summarize for me. Try to re-summarize the point you're making.
So I'm saying that nothing stays the same indefinitely. Things change, and you're going to have to be able to adapt to the change. And you adapting to that change would be your mind being open to being more factual in taking in information and logical in processing that information rationally in order to get it understanding and how to deal with issues. Because if you don't, then it can be your demise, which is what happened. It was a lot of people's demise of being nearly wiped out. Instead of thinking scientifically along lines of medicine, they thought along lines of their conformist beliefs of religion in dealing with the Black Plague.
Mm-hmm.
So you just made a really good case for, not denigrating artistic achievement or things that are new. But you didn't really make a case for the social institutions. In fact, you just made the case on why you shouldn't senselessly denigrate them. It's like when you're getting new knowledge, you have to build on something. You don't just get thrown into whatever without understanding the foundations. You have to have the genealogy of the idea, the genealogy of the subject to gain an understanding. You don't just go straight to whatever the newest theory is without an understanding of what was before. That's like, as a psychologist, you don't just get thrown into cognitive behavioral patterns without first understanding, the philosophy that became psychology.
People didn't understand. People didn't have an understanding. You just conformed to norms. That was it. It was just strict norms, and people conformed to them.
I think that's what Sean was saying, wasn't he?
Well, it would have been nice to be able to make my point is the fact that, Freud and Jung are social institutions. Now, we also understand that there's a lot that Freud and Jung probably got wrong, but there's a lot that got right, and we built upon those foundations for something new. That's where, you got Irvin Yalom, Rollo May. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy, reality therapy from William Glasser, it all got built on those foundations of what was got right. So we do not denigrate the social institutions that were Freud, Jung, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Botswanger, and Boss from an existential perspective, but we don't senselessly denigrate the new achievements that are made in, the different therapeutic modalities that we use with our clients, or even for the new personality models that we're still coming up with that work well within the Big Five. I mean, it used to be whether you were an INJF or what other Myers-Briggs type combination of personality types, which is obviously not reliable or valid in any sort of empirical sense. But we built off of that. So you have to have an appreciation for those social institutions. You're making an argument for...
No, I'm not. I do agree with that. I don't. No, I'm not. I agree with that. One thing does lead to another. I'm not saying I'm against that. I'm not anti it. It is good.
Then make an argument for the social institutions that we should keep instead of making.
I just did. I said that it's good. It keeps the norm, but it's not. But you have to have both sides. It's not just about just one thing. They're yin and yang. They go together. I understand. Like institution is good, but the other side is good too. It all depends. I'm not saying either one thing is bad or the other is bad.
I just want to jump to so Rule 12 and 12 Rules for Life, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the new book. But Rule 12 is pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. And then there are a couple subsections here, and I want this subsection of suffering and the limitations of being. I had highlighted this. I don't know why I did, but I'm going to read through it and let's see what we can discover. The idea that life is suffering is a tenet in one form or another of every major religious doctrine, as we have already discussed. Buddhists state it directly. Christians illustrate it with the cross. Jews commemorate the suffering endured over centuries. Such reasoning universally characterizes the great creeds because human beings are intrinsically fragile. We can be damaged, even broken, emotionally and physically, and we are all subject to the depredations of aging and loss. This is a dismal set of facts, and it is reasonable to wonder how we can expect to thrive and be happy, or even want to exist sometimes under such conditions. Now, this idea of that this is a dismal set of facts. Yoga, I just wanted to bring you in. Do you believe that, the facts of reality of what the human ape is? Do you think it is a dismal set of facts? The fact that we can be damaged, even broken, and have our lifespan.
You want to know if I think people can be broken?
Well, I want to know if you think it's dismal, the fact that we are so fragile. Do you view it as dismal, or do you view it as just like one might view it as part of the beauty of nature, the fragility?
I don't know if I have an opinion on this one way or another. I think it is what it is. We can be broken.
Right.
We can be fixed.
And do you find that to be a nasty truth about reality, or are you kind of indifferent to it? You're just like, it's reality.
Yeah, I think I'm just indifferent to it. It is as it is, unfortunately.
Right.
I think, in some sense, Jordan Peterson is projecting his personality or his neurotic personality.
Interesting.
Maybe he has depression.
Well, yeah, he definitely. Jordan suffers from deep clinical depression. Yes.
Oh, yes, he does. So he's obviously projecting a little of his personality onto other people.
So do I as well. But one thing I'll tell you is that when I read this, I don't see this as a dismal set of facts. And someone might say, well, you would if it's your grandmother dying of brain cancer on the gurney. No, I still don't. I just see it as I look at it as like, wow, it's so exciting to me that we've all had this chance to experience this cinema one way or another. But another guy suffering from clinical depression like Jordan, he writes out, this is a dismal set of facts.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't experience that much suffering in my life. I mean, I think I have a pretty high, kind of a baseline level of well-being. So I guess I don't relate that much to that aspect of.
So you would say for one to relate. Now let's jump to Sean quickly. Sean, what do you think about describing this as a dismal set of facts, the is reality of the human ape?
And you can definitely tell where the idea came from Heidegger and Kierkegaard especially, that existence is extremely fragile, and it can lead to a lot of suffering, and it can, especially if you don't have anything meaningful or anything worthwhile. And so that's kind of where that comes from. And I think it is true that if you don't have anything worthwhile, that existence can be absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think Joe Rogan even called him out on this. And he said, these things have to work in the worst case scenario.
Yeah. You know what though? We can look at some people living in the worst of impoverished situations and suffering. They've lost kids to malaria or some kind of fucking parasite that eats the child from the eye into the brain and kills your child. But they still are able to move on and prosper in spite of what Jordan is describing as a dismal set of facts. I want to jump to a Zombie. What up, Zombie?
Hey.
Hey. I want to ask you, I'm just going to read this again, this part. Well, actually, I will summarize. So the fact that, Zombie, we can be damaged and our lifespan is finite. We can be psychologically and physically damaged and even broken. Do you see this as a dismal set of facts, or would you interpret that differently?
Well, I just hopped on, so I have no idea what you're talking about, but I think people are very resilient.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we're getting somewhere. Now, do you think, let me ask you, when you look out at reality and you look at the human condition, when there are ways to look at the human condition and say, holy shit, reality is dismal and it's brutal. Just let's say we're speaking generally, it's, just a simple, aneurysm in the brain can end it all. Do you think this is, would you classify this as being like a dismal fact about reality, or would you call it like more just like it's part of the amazing process, that may come to some bad conclusions, but it's still just the beautiful process of life? Or do you look at that through a dismal lens?
Oh, I think I'm definitely a cup half full kind of person, not the cup half empty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I try to live my life that if I were to hop off of a curb and get hit by a bus, I mean, really, I hope that I've impacted people positively, and I won't know whether I'm dead or not. So, it really doesn't matter to me, if I'm like all of a sudden I have a sudden death.
Right.
So I think that life, people need to find joys in life as they're doing things. Like right now I'm standing on one leg balancing just because I feel like it. And I'm kind of enjoying the fact that I have one leg that's screaming at me right now. And I'll switch it up here in a minute. But like, I think that there's joy in little things that we do. And if you're rushing through life and not accepting that, then I could see why it would look abysmal.
Right. Now, I have to think back. Was it yesterday or the day before that we came up with the female term for bromance? I think that was on Friday. What was that term? Oh, yeah.
What? Well, it was not womance. I thought that was a dorky term. Maybe somebody settled on femance, or...
I think I brought up vagimance, but everyone turned that
down.
Yeah,
vagimance.
But I just wanted to bring that up.
But that sounds like Vagisil. I think that sounds like a product that's already been termed out there for disgusting moist vagina that has some overproduction of yeast. So I think vagimance would be not a good thing.
Wow, our viewership just went up. I just wanted to bring that up. Zombie, because we do have another woman in the room, Yoga
Excellent.
Bag Howell, and I thought you would be excited about that.
Hey, everybody.
Which person is it?
Yoga.
Oh, Yoga Bag Howell. Awesome.
Yoga Bagul.
Right. Yoga Bagul. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of doing the tree pose right now, Yoga. So...
I'm laying in bed with a bag of chips and my dog.
Amazing.
Well, I was just laying on the couch with my dog, so I can totally relate.
Well, there's rule 13 as we finish off with 12 rules for life here, and we can obviously delve back in, but rule 13, sometimes lay in bed with a bag of chips and your dog. There you go.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Sean was saying he's halfway through chapter 2 in the new book, and of course it's Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules for Life Beyond Order. I know a lot of his fan base was just salivating to get their hands on this book, and I have not read it yet. It's on my list. I need to take.
I've never actually read anything by Jordan Peterson or looked at any of his YouTube stuff, so I've just heard a lot from various people.
Yeah.
Were those various people males by chance?
Oh yes, they do seem to be males.
Figured.
And Zombie, what kind of feedback do you typically hear? Let's actually break it down by the sexes. Well, first of all, have you heard any feedback about Jordan Peterson by any women?
No, I kind of feel like he must exude some things that kind of silo him in the meat factory.
That's what Yoga said. And you know, I think, you know what I think it is, because I like tons of women buy his work and watch his work and follow his Twitter, follow him on social media, follow him on Instagram. But I think it's, and the reason why I wanted to ask you, Zombie, because I would, if you're not a centrist, I would say you probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps fall on the center right side of the spectrum. Would you say?
Well, actually, if you would have asked me that probably a year ago before all the riots in Portland, I probably would have said center left.
Yeah.
But after being in the middle of a bunch of bullshit, I would say, yeah, center right, most definitely now.
Yeah. And now I think I have found that most of the Jordan Peterson female fans, and I'm not saying all, but most, would be on the center right persuasion, because a lot of Jordan's ideas are about trying to conserve some traditional ideas, some basic ideas, and also some that just you can hear echoing from your mother, to clean your room. Some of these concepts that we have heard before, and Jordan's reiterating them and communicating them in his own way.
I mean, I could see that. I think that there are traditional values that I've always kind of that I value myself. But I don't like to think that people need to be put in a box and defined, frankly. I think that we're constantly evolving, changing beings. So to be like placed in a certain set of criteria is kind of, I guess, against the grain of what I think is healthy for people.
Mm.
I agree with that. And I just, in trying to understand Jordan Peterson and maybe we could go back to the agreeableness. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like he's under the belief that most females are agreeable, and that's just a natural thing, and it's not any sort of reflection on society, or if it were a reflection on society, it's because it's natural to be that way.
Yeah, well, he would put it that when he's making a comparison to comparing the sexes and making a general statement based on the clinical psychological data that we have, that women tend to be more agreeable than men in general. That's what he would say.
Would he say?
And then if you look at the personality traits of, say, women who become CEOs, they generally tend to be in those positions much less agreeable. People with lower levels of agreeableness tend to be moving up these positions much quicker and have an easier time doing it.
Sure. I guess I'm just confused as to what he thinks the cause of that is. Does he just think that's a genetic?
Well,
we're just biologically different, or is that like a societal?
Well, I think you'll find him saying that, okay, we have the data, and then now we need to look at potential causes after we see the data. And then then Jordan likes to look at, like, okay, for the most part throughout human history, men have been coming out of the womb and have been primed to go die on the battlefield in general. And then the women who are born are primed to become mothers to help grow the future the future masses for the next armies. Like, that's basically the whole history of the human condition up until very recently, where we've been able to, do something a little bit differently. And
Travis.
And again, that's just the general scope. So then we have to look at things like that and say, okay, what are some potential reasons these personality traits, these general personality traits, could have come about? And Jordan would say human history and the biological, let's say, predispositions of men versus women are going to yield different personality traits over time.
Can I say something to that?
You were trying to get in, yeah.
Why you think women were mostly burnt as witches?
Is this another non sequitur, dude? I hope you have a point.
They couldn't always vote. They couldn't always vote, and
Yes.
when work in the workplace, they had to fight to work in the workplace.
And do you know why?
In civil rights,
Nivek,
and they were
just
discriminated
hold on,
against.
Nivek, hold on. Just make sure you don't make the jump to that not every woman throughout history, like the movement for women to vote wasn't as one-sided as people like to believe. Like, all women wanted that privilege. It's actually not historically accurate.
What does this have to do with agreeableness? I'm confused.
Well, are there the question is that Jordan is looking at is, does human history shape generalized personality traits? Because if you think of, like, if you have a predisposition, let's say a genetic predisposition to be more agreeable than the next person, where the question is, where on a micro scale, in microevolution, and through teaching and growing up and passing on those traits, how much has that played into the differences when you take into consideration the general biological roles when it comes to reproduction? But it's part cultural. What has that played? Yeah, Nivek, no one's saying it's not, that culture isn't involved, but how much has that role played? And I'll pass that question around the room. How much has the biological roles really been the key driver into the generalized personality traits that we see today, based on the ocean categorization in clinical psychology of personality traits?
Can I extend this question really quick?
Yeah, Yoga, go ahead.
Okay, because I think that everything that you've said has made sense, and I don't find it offensive or puts me in a box. I think that's all very logical, but I think phase 2 of this is, like, how do we move beyond this? And I think, to me, people like Jordan Peterson, they want to maintain those kind of roles, and they want to perpetuate.
But
go ahead.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, welcome, Zurich.
Let her finish.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry,
just one sec. Zombie, I think she made a point. Richard Zurich had something to say there in response.
No, go ahead, Yoga. You can finish. Excuse me for interrupting you.
That's okay. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I just wanted to see how the room felt about how we get beyond perpetuating those things and how we move forward from them. And I think kind of the conservative perspective is to hold on and maintain them. And I think the progressive side of it wants to let go and move on.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, speaking on behalf of Jordan, what Jordan will often say when people ask if he desires to maintain that is he reminds them of his work as a clinical psychologist. And a lot of the work he claims that he did there was helping women to build their careers and to pursue high-end positions as partners in law firms and other white collar positions. And so I don't think that Peterson wants to lock women into that more agreeable role by any means at all.
And I want to add something there, Zurich. He's making a statement of, he's taking the what is and how we determine what is through the and again, I have to say this, and I say this a lot on this channel, clinical psychology and this personality testing, it is general, and it requires that we're doing that, the person taking these tests to see where they land on the agreeableness scale, as an example, they are general. It's not a hard science like a lot of people might think it is, but it's just the idea to get for a person, it's a self-authoring thing for a person to understand generally their personality and to help quantify it a little bit, to be able to look at objectively yourself in a sense, and look at it and say, oh, okay, I'm generally a pretty agreeable person. What if anything should I look at with regards to this full personality trait and have that inform my future decisions? Now, some people will say, well, I choose not to care about it, and that's fine. That's more the ought that is within each of us to say, okay, how ought I deal with this information? But the information is still correct generally. If you are given this, this personality test and you score a 1 out of 10 in agreeableness, if you come out and you want to say, no, I'm a very disagreeable person, and you want to overcome that, you can try. But the personality testing is trying to give you a general sense of who you are. And it's not as accurate as IQ testing, where with IQ testing, it's actually right or wrong answers. But the personality thing is much more tuned to be general.
Yeah, I think Yoga Bagel, she has the intuition that talking about, let's say, biological realities to the extent that they exist might chain us to our personalities and prevent us from changing and from kind of evolving but what I would say is that culture can severely alter the biological. So like, even if you are agreeable, you can still you can recognize that, okay, let's say I'm biologically inclined to be agreeable, but I'm going to fight against this let's say proclivity to be agreeable. I'm going to fight against this, and I'm going to assert myself. And I think recognizing the biological is not an impediment. It's an understanding of yourself, and it's okay, I'm going to fight against this thing that I have inside of me, and I'm going to do I'm going to assert myself in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I don't think biology is kind of chains you in any way. I think it can lead to the freedom that we need. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Like, whatever you want to do with the is findings of whatever systems we have in place to be able to determine, how you are different in a certain category than, let's say, the general mean or someone else. I think we should use these self-authoring systems, self-identifying systems, to look at, some realities, and then say, and like Josh just said, perhaps we need to have a mantra or a new psychological mechanism for, like, if someone who tends to be disagreeable wants to remind themselves to assert themselves more, then yeah, I think that's using the scientific method to help better the human condition. And and a lot of people do a misreading of Jordan, saying that Jordan will make the true statement that in general women tend to be far less agreeable than men. And then people will want to say, well, that just means Jordan just wants women to be agreeable and sit in the kitchen and listen to everything a man has to say. That's not what Jordan's saying at all. It has nothing to do with it. That particular reading is a straw man of what Jordan is saying.
And Travis?
Well, I mean, and that also goes to say that he's defining being disagreeable as negative, because I don't necessarily think having like a devil's advocate viewpoint, even at the business table, is negative. We need to look at individuals, and it's not just personality and biology and gender and cultural or religious or regional things. It's also life circumstances, and we have to constantly check in with our realities to see if we need to make slight adjustments. Mm-hmm. So like I've had points in my career where I think that maybe being driven and working hard and maybe being overcommitted have been interpreted as being disagreeable, where I've not really being disagreeable, but I'm so focused on an end goal or a mission mm-hmm. that I'm not really taking into consideration other people's feelings or opinions.
Yeah, and that's a bit of the conscientiousness, a bit of the spectrum as well, where there is a scale of, I don't know how you would scientifically term it, but sort of a doggedness to achieve some sort of goal. It seems that some people are more disposed to being able to do that than other people.
And just to run down, you guys use ocean as for the big five personality. Okay. And ocean spells openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So those would be the things that would be measured for your personality to give you some insight to who you are. And this can be done through really detailed testing that seeks to be non-intuitive, so that people aren't trying to tune their answers to be what they want to be. Like, another example of how bad the generally people are at this is you go on like a dating website, and then people will be like, I'm this, I'm that, I do this and I do that, I'm like this, I'm like that. I think people in general are really bad at knowing who they are. That's my interpretation of, the results people get and the shock they get when they take a test like this, or with IQ. It's a big one. People think that they have a very high, pristine IQ, but they find out that, okay, they're average or a little bit above average. And then also on the other side of that spectrum, where they're quite a quiet person and they think that quietness means that they don't have an high IQ, but then they take an IQ test and then they score 130, 140 on average, and they're way up there. So I think this kind of testing, self-authoring, finding out who you actually are as objectively as possible, and then applying that to your life in some way that's going to be helpful, I think is a really good thing. And that's what I think Jordan does. And I think he is victim of much straw manning with his work, of people who, I would just say get triggered by some of these general statements that are actually just known in clinical psychology, but Jordan talks about them and people be like, oh, how do you know that? And it's like, well, go read a fucking book.
I think a legitimate criticism of Jordan is that he makes a lot of descriptive claims without making any proscriptive claims.
What's that mean?
Sure, you want to give an example?
Yeah, with regards to how society should be.
What does that mean?
He'll say, okay,
just let him finish, Nivik.
Right now, currently, men or women or females are more agreeable than males, but he doesn't make any prescriptive claims for how like what should society look like, what should we strive for culturally to change these realities.
I think he makes those.
He just makes Yeah.
Josh, 2 seconds. Not everyone wants to change these realities. I think that's a false presupposition. Many people are very happy to be whatever they are, and they don't wish. It's like during the movement of women wanting to vote. It was a small group of women that were on this movement to give women the right to vote. Most women just were indifferent to it, because voting tend to carry the baggage with like having to potentially be in the draft for war, and like they didn't want to play in that, and it sounds very sexist, but they didn't want to play in that man's game of war. So a lot of women, for even survival purposes or for preserving what they like, said, I don't want to vote. So it's when you say striving to change the general mean in personality types, you're talking about trying to edit biology. Some people aren't going to agree that they want to edit biology like that, or the biological general norms. Yeah.
Okay, so you are saying that Jordan does want to change females to their biological reality. That is what you're saying.
No. Jordan will say that, in his practice, he has helped women to identify with the 5 big personality traits, to help identify where they may need to have mechanisms within their worldview that drive them to be more of something if they currently are not that. That's up to the individual if they so choose to do that. But what Jordan will also say is that there's nothing wrong with a woman wishing to live traditionally the way that individual thinks that women ought to be, because we all have our own moral ought claims that we wish to make about reality. And he's saying there's nothing wrong with someone who wants to, conserve, let's say, the woman's position in the home. That he would make that argument.
But I would say now that women are free and they're not stuck at home.
Women have never been stuck at home.
Well,
are you serious? Are you
maybe.
Women have never been forced to be stuck at home.
You don't know. That's not true.
I'm talking in general. There's never been a law, for instance, in Britain and in the United States, there's never been a law in the West that says women have to stay at home.
They were fearful to speak out. They were fearful to speak out.
Yeah, you know what societal
were.
Yeah. Travis, I'm really a conservative, and I would push back on that a bit. You would have to concede that today, if a woman wants to have a career, it's far easier to do it than it was 100 years ago.
I agree with that statement. But I'm talking. You guys have
they're good with that.
Don't strawman the claim. The claim was that there wasn't a law in place. That's the claim I made to keep women at home.
But I think the claim that I made was me trying to better represent what Josh was trying to get across.
That's fine. Yeah, but I'm still I'll still stick by my claim that it's just never been written into the law. Like women weren't locked up. Someone might use that as a metaphor and say they were locked up psychologically because of the implications of society. And I'm happy to go down that artistic route if you want. But I'm just being clear about the law, because we still want words to mean something, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the use of extremist language to describe things when we have words to describe them accurately.
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question, why you think they were mostly burned as witches, women?
What do you?
I don't care about the witch. I care
Nivik, just
women in.
Yeah, go ahead, Yoga.
I appreciate Nivik's sentiment. I don't care about witches, but to say that women were not locked up at home, sure, that's true. But if they couldn't have a bank account until 1960s, then there's no freedom, really. They are dependent on a man. That's not the society we have.
So you realize, just one sec, you do realize, Yoga, that a lot of women at that time didn't want a bank account.
Sure, but the fact that if you did want one and you couldn't have one.
Yes, I agree with you.
That's very problematic.
I
but it's
agree.
also, but it's not only that. Pangburn. it's the realization that you can't even realize what you want because you're in a society where you're kind of stuck. You're stuck with.
So that's not true, Josh. So women eventually did. There was enough pressure on the women's side, on the women's front, to want to say we want bank accounts now, we want to vote now, and then when those issues came up, they were voted on, and society accepted.
Yeah, and you also see, and this is something else that Jordan talks about, is that generally women will conform to certain lifestyles if you don't try to alter that. And he often cites the study of Scandinavian gender equality ventures, and talks about how when Scandinavian countries attempted to force men into, say, nursing and teaching, and women into science and math, that actually drove the numbers in the opposite direction that the scientists and the politicians wanted them to go. And so, not in a sort of, in a way, I'm not saying this specifically about the bank account thing, but when women didn't want bank accounts 100 years ago, a smaller percentage of women will have the same sort of sentiment about not having the same kind of life today as they would have 100 years ago. So.
Yeah, and feel free to jump on that point, guys. I'm going to mute for a bit and going to leave the room open. So feel free to. I'll be back in a little bit, but feel free to engage on any of these points and themes we're talking about.
Just to spin off on those bank accounts, I find that I probably need to do a little bit of family research, because I know my great grandmother owned a grocery store that she then turned into a gas station at one point, and was really the main breadwinner in the family from very early on. So I'm wondering how she was able to keep her money.
So I want to throw out there that you guys, as you're going through this, make sure you try to confirm your historical statements, like women weren't allowed to own bank accounts, and just try to go through the research process just to see if you can actually find a law that was written, because there's a difference between the social pressures of it not being right for women to own a bank account, or the actual law not saying that you actually cannot own a bank account. So just be wise of that.
I'm thinking that I actually have like not bank statements, but little bank books that are leather and things like that, because I keep a lot of the family history. So I mean, even if women were not allowed to have bank accounts, they still were. No different than I did a little research in Oregon a number of years ago on Oregon history through old censuses on people of color in Oregon, and way before it became the whole woke bullshit. But there were a number of people of color, and the majority of early trappers, even before Oregon the state, were marrying Native American women and any woman that was available, because there just weren't very many women in the Oregon territories, which include Oregon and Washington, or what we would call the Pacific Northwest. And because of property rights, and individuals who were of color were not able to own property. If you put the censuses together, every 10 years, where individuals were born, maybe they were biracial, part Native American and white, that they would slowly assimilate to white if they were male, so that they could have property rights, and the next generation it could be passed down to their children. So, whether it's a law or not, people make adjustments to make things work for them.
I didn't mean to lead us down some sort of straw man thing. It just feels intuitive that women have not had equal rights in this country as long as men. And whether they wanted to not have those rights, I feel like is irrelevant. The fact.
Good point.
Yeah,
So,
I guess
like, just
the
because-
only point that I always make on this is that when you move to remove barriers against minorities, that doesn't equal completely evenly distributed representation. So if you remove every law or even put in place a bunch of programs to attempt to get 50-50 representation, let's say in the gender arena, that isn't going to easily occur.
Yeah. Well, I just want to clarify something. To say that females in our past history wanted to not have rights is complete bullshit. Because even if you were a mother, you were a traditional mother, and you maybe you thought it was okay that you didn't get to vote or whatever. Like you don't know you don't, in some sense, you don't know what you're missing. Like if you're not like let's say you're not working, right? You don't know that working is better than being a traditional mother. So like if you're handed down certain like ideas and cultural ideals for what a woman should be, of course you're gonna think that you should have no rights. But that doesn't mean that given the opportunity to have rights, or given the thoughts of like, oh, your life would be better if you had rights, like that. If that doesn't occur to you, then I mean, you don't really have a choice in the matter.
So Josh, there are still like big groups of conservative women that think that policing is man's work. So you are going to have, as everyone has their own subjective moral foundation. So you are going to have different people looking at different rights and laws and coming up and making these sexual generalities towards those things and make statements like that still today.
But they changed.
I agree with what Josh said. And I'll go back to an old law that used to be in various states around the U.S., which was the rule of thumb. And if you don't know what that term means, that meant that your husband had a right to beat his wife or with a stick no larger than the circumference of his thumb. So
yeah, which is fucked.
Yeah, like I'm telling you, anybody tried to do that to me, I'd probably be shoving that stick up their nostril at one point in the middle of the night. I was being nice about that. But
well, zombie, let me ask you this one. I want to get your take. Do you think that, and just because you said you're probably at this point on like the center right of the political spectrum, do you think women in general should not go into law enforcement?
Ha ha ha.
Like I know, and I want to ask you because you're in that field.
No, I think that's asinine, and I think that most of the women that probably are making that judgment think that women in law enforcement fight every single day of the week.
Yeah.
So, and not to dox myself, but that's been my career for a very long time. So, I mean, I think that that's ridiculous. There's no different than, I was a coach for many years, and I can always find what some kid on my team is good at and highlight them. So no different than being a good coach, I would have to find what is best for my staff to be assigned to for that evening or day. Um, I feel like I probably have a lot less uses of force than most individuals that I work with. And is that because I'm a better communicator than them? I can talk people down. Who knows? Women bring different tools to the table than men do. And I think the diversity is what is important. No different than culturally, we bring different tools to the table to deal with different types of people. So I think that incarcerated women have increased in the last 15 or so years from about 12% to about 20 to 25% nationally. And that's not just on a federal level, but that's also in local counties, jails, and then state prisons. So you need females to work in law enforcement, not just for the safety of incarcerated people, but because, frankly, it's not just about equity; it's about doing a good job.
Zombie.
Yeah.
You're saying it's good to bring in different perspectives when trying to solve a problem, right? Than just one perspective. Yeah. To reason with when it comes to problems. If if you have one person, one group think, you're not really adding anything. If somebody thinks like you and then the other person thinks the same thing that you think, and the next person thinks the same thing that you think, and then the next person thinks the same thing. It's good to have different.
Yeah, but we're not burning witches at the stake anymore.
I was gonna say, Nivik, I swear, if you bring that up again.
No, my point was that it's because they're powerless, and that's why that was being done to them.
Well,
they were.
Yeah, go ahead.
They were imposed on because they were powerless. And
I have one more question for Zombie that I have to ask, just because since we're on this topic. Zombie,
you always like to pick on me.
Oh, I just love hearing from you. That's all.
Yeah, I agree.
What? So traditionally, and kind of still exists, and most people, I've ran this poll recently. Women and children before men in situations where you have to negotiate, say, with a mass killer who has a bunch of hostages. You tend to try and get the women and children released first. What do you think about that?
I think it's tactical. Whichever is most convenient and safe.
So sorry, I mean, what about men being secondary to women and children?
No, I know what you say. That wouldn't even be a choice in my mind.
Like, you don't think people should think that way?
Right.
Oh, okay. Interesting. The poll, when we did that poll, women and children first, I think it was 95% said yes and 5%. So I would say well, let's ask the room. What do you guys think of that?
But maybe they're not tactical thinkers. You're not looking at gender and race and age, when you're in the middle of a situation. You're trying to resolve it as
I would say children first, but not I would say children first. Not necessarily. I don't think gender matters, but definitely, like if you're
children have little control in situations. So children most definitely, but the women thing, that's not going to be that. I don't think that's even going to be a thought.
I mean, isn't there a physical advantage that males have over females? Like that maybe it's easier for a male to save himself in whatever situation.
Not against a gun.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I've always thought that part of it might be just the historical, the history of like how this culture is growing. And I'd be interested to see if like women and children is a cross-cultural thing, because I'm pretty sure it is. But
yeah, Oh, sorry, Zach. Continue.
But like as like I can't help but see the parallel to the Mother Mary and the baby Jesus when people say woman and children. But that's just me. So
Yeah, so people who don't have that, that archetype or belief, are maybe going to look at that differently.
right,
So-
but my argument there was just because the that religion has for so long saturated
Right.
at least this culture that it has been removed from the more explicitly supernatural part.
So, and if we look at history too, there's some implication here with regards to what were our rules and how much has that played on how we view generally both sexes, including we were perfectly fine sending young men to go and die with swords in their hands, but not fine with sending young women to go die with swords in their hands on the battlefield.
I feel completely satisfied to let that go and to step into a future where it's more just about someone's physical ability, which of course men are more physically fit for those scenarios often. But if anyone watched that Amanda Nunes fight yesterday, like, we're coming up, we'll be there with you.
Well, like in powerlifting.
And yeah, I mean, just physical shape and
just in general.
Yeah.
Right, but you understand that, like, the Williams sisters in, like, when we're talking about sports, they can't even beat like the, guy who's rated like 150 in the male circuit.
I mean, sure, but
that's true to some sports, I would say.
Ladies could.
Billie Jean King won though.
It depends on the sport.
That happened already.
If it's like cross country, then there isn't that much of a difference between.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's in contact sports. I think it's ridiculous to have biological males competing with biological females. I think it's retarded.
That is pretty ridiculous.
Oh boy.
There's ways you can do it though, like the relay.
Yeah, there's certain sports where it is like okay to mix. Like I don't see a problem. Like I'm pretty sure like cross country is one of them.
Well, I'll give you guys an example of even in team sports where it did happen. In hockey, the Tampa Bay Lightning brought in
hockey.
Just wait, Nivitz. the Tampa Bay Lightning brought in a goalie to play for one game, a female goalie. She ended up getting lit up, which doesn't mean that female goalies might have better results in the future. But you wouldn't put a female player on the ice where she could get ran over when she touched the puck. We can look at the best players like Haley Wickenheiser, who could have been one who might have potentially been able, based on her skill set, to play in the NHL, but she would have got killed when it comes to the body checking element, the physical dominance element.
I think that's an interesting argument, but if we're just talking about like the functionality of gender roles and what we can expect each gender to do, sports maybe, but definitely in regards to the military, I feel like if we have a physical test that we've been giving and a female can pass that without having to lower that test, many men these days will fail that same test. We don't need to move far. Many females.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's correct.
I mean, if women pass the test, then they should be let in. Yeah. But I mean, we just have to be open to the possibility that not as many women will pass it.
Right. What was the justification for the transgender military ban? Was there any like reasonable justification?
Why they didn't want someone with trans in the military?
Yeah. What was it?
I think someone was trying to make a statistical argument from like the rate of mental health issues, the general rate of mental health issues that exist within someone, and this is just an is statement, not a ought statement, but the
Right.
What we have for statistical data that, they're saying, okay, we have statistical precedent to see that someone who is trans might have X, but I'm sitting here saying, just fucking test them for those things with a clinical psychologist. If they don't have them, just fucking let them in the military.
But I mean, just touching on mental health, I haven't done research, but my history teacher is she's the mother of a Navy SEAL and the wife of a National Guardsman, and she talks a lot about the atrocious rates of mental health and suicide within the military, and she chalks it up to an army that has to be constantly ready for battle when there isn't an outlet for that. Kind of similar to if a person is always on alert, and that's gonna have really bad effects on their body and their mental health. So, that's a huge problem from what I understand, and one that isn't being addressed at all.
Right, really. But I think there's more variation amongst individuals than there are even between a trans the trans group and the non-trans group. So I think it's better to just continue to evaluate individuals and their proclivity.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe they should be evaluated not only at the beginning, but throughout their career, which would probably start to highlight some of the issues surrounding accumulative trauma and maybe assist people if they do have some PTSD stuff going on.
Yeah, I think people should heed, like in this competitive sports thing, contact sport, people should really heed the warning of science in this regard of how hard, let's say in the UFC, a male can hit versus a female, because I do not want to see this retarded matchup of a UFC male champion versus a female one and have a female have a woman competitor break her neck because some of these retards didn't want to listen to the scientific data and the reality of the differences of between the sexes.
And maybe look at domestic violence rates in the nation and see who the majority of the perpetrators are and the victims.
Sure.
Jermaine Demannery fought a man.
Yeah, overwhelmingly more men who are perpetrators in domestic violence. That's statistically proven.
Yeah. Same with most crimes.
Zombie,
from what I understand.
What do you think about the idea of like most men don't here's another thing. People try to use this argument all the time, and I think it's a stupid argument. Well, we don't have all the statistics that are available on this particular thing because people don't report it. How do you know they're not reporting it? Because if you take a poll, and you say how many of you have not reported it, and they click yes, that doesn't mean they actually have had that experience.
I think it's bullshit. Look at what's happened in Portland, where you have and it's actually in the majority of Democratic run major metropolitan areas right now, where a lot of crimes are not being moved forward. So people may be arrested for things, but the district attorneys have the authority to not indict and take things to grand jury, unless they're, obviously things that have to move forward, like domestic violence. I'll just throw that one out there again. And so it makes our crime statistics look a lot lower previous to now, because they're not actually moving forward on even charges that have been brought forward. So they're killing them. So our statistics can be definitely skewed.
I guess I have a question. No, I'm probably the most far left person in this voice chat. Does anybody think it's wrong to riot against public property?
Yeah, don't break the fucking law.
Because I think it's okay. Like I think it's okay to riot against morally okay to riot against public property.
So you're
I think it's wrong to riot against public and private property.
right.
Well, so even if you think it's wrong in both cases, you obviously agree that rioting against private property is like 10 times worse, right?
Stop rioting, protest. It's within the law.
Yeah. Non-violent protest.
Yeah.
For the win.
I mean,
rioting doesn't have any
rioting is for
conversation in the
criminals.
middle of it. It has no conversation. So what's the purpose other than to just
civil disobedience? Civil disobedience is a part of American history.
I knew you would go there.
Yeah, that's fine. But what like the kind?
Josh, come on over to my house in civil disobedience.
America was birthed off civil disobedience, by the way, by the Tea Party.
Wait, can I just clarify something? I think it's wrong to riot against. I think that's really wrong to riot against private property. I'm really against that.
Yeah,
but
and to shoot people that disagree with you.
No, I never. What is this straw manning fest?
No. I didn't say you said that. I'm just adding that as a additional thing that's happening within the context of the riots in the United States.
Yeah.
Most riots throughout U.S. history is from the right, wasn't from the left, and the U.S. was birthed off rioting by the Tea Party revolt.
Yeah, who cares though?
Yeah, I mean, like
I get you.
Like productive functional rioting. Like, if you can, in your conscience, justify rationally to yourself that rioting will accomplish your goal, then go ahead. But if you're doing it just because you want to cause chaos, which, for my judgment, seems to be the motivation for most of the rioting, at least in America, then that is morally irresponsible.
Yeah. Do you know what's happening with these riots right now? These losers can't demonstrate what their rioting is founded on. This idea of systemic racism still existing. It doesn't fucking exist. It hasn't been demonstrated. So
what? Are you serious?
100%.
Oh, let's have this argument.
Josh, if you can demonstrate it right on the air right now, you'll win the Nobel Prize.
Oh wow. Okay.
I'm saying you can win the Nobel Prize if you can demonstrate how systemic racism, not that it has existed, because it did, and then those laws were abolished, but that systemic racism exists right now. If you can demonstrate it, you win the Nobel Prize here today.
Okay. Do you not think the war on drugs?
Just let Josh go for a bit.
Is the war on drugs considered past history, or
the war on drugs is still continuing now?
Okay, so isn't that like an example of systemic racism?
How does the war on drugs, how it's applied?
I could answer that.
Just wait, Nivik. Hold on for a sec. How does the war on drugs target, and I'm saying directly target, not by some mental gymnastics, directly target one race over the other? Nivik, mute for a second, please.
Nivik, you can answer.
No.
I know the answer.
So, I'm going to give Nivik a chance, but I want to hear Josh's response first.
By Ronald Reagan, war on drugs and crime, he was bringing drugs and guns into the U.S. It wasn't about drugs in South America. It was about imperialism of taking out other competitive companies to. In having dominance in that region, and it's about trickle down economics. It was about scapegoating blacks as an issue to get votes in order to implement trickle down.
That is true.
What?
Let me just say. Can I just say?
Just Nivik. I'm the moderator today, so when I tell you to shut up,
I didn't say anything.
Okay.
I didn't say anything.
I wanted to hear Josh's, before you open up all these tangents, I wanted to hear Josh's response to my question.
Yeah. Okay. So do you think that during the war on drugs, that black people were disproportionately arrested compared to white people. Is that a claim that you agree that we can both agree with?
Yes,
Agree.
we actually
No.
have. Well, here's
Hold
what
on.
I'll say. If
you
that
say no,
number
you're
happened,
wrong. You're just wrong.
Josh,
I'm
Hold
telling
on.
you, they disproportionately used drugs. It was
Yes,
not the root cause of the issue.
but zombie, that agrees with what Josh just claimed. So let me just sort out the is aspect of this. So Josh, when it comes to who was incarcerated when this was all rolled out and how many have been incarcerated to now, if you want to pull up a racial statistic, a race-based statistic, then yes, blacks have been arrested at a higher rate. But now that we have agreed on that statistic, demonstrate that it was because they were black that's why they were incarcerated.
Okay, first of all, I don't care. I think Nivek, he brought up an intention argument that it was like the intent of the U.S. to put black people in prison. I'm not going to make that argument. I don't care about intention. Okay, I just care about the effect. That is just laws can have disproportionate effects on certain populations. Do you agree with that or not?
Yes, that is true, and it goes for people who happen to have high levels of aesthetic beauty, big noses, long hair, tattoos, all of these different things that you can put. But for the context of this conversation, we are focusing on race, correct?
Yeah, but you can't change that. We can change policy.
Just wait. So we're talking about systemic racism, right? What policy do you think that exists right now is systemically racist?
Gerrymandering.
So wait, can I just say one thing? We were talking about the war on drugs. And are you going to pivot from that or?
No. So ask your question. Ask your question about the war on drugs.
Wait,
So you
just continue to make your point.
Okay. So do you think that the war on drugs disproportionately affected black people, regardless of intention?
Yes.
Did it?
Yes.
Okay. So that is an example of policy.
I mean,
but that I would say that's not the only thing that disproportionately affected any person of color.
Gerrymandering.
Sure, but that wasn't part of the question.
To include black people, which I actually personally do care, since my entire family is black. So,
but let me just say, putting fathers in prison has a very detrimental impact on
putting
children.
That's the
anyone
argument
in
that
prison. And the overrepresentation of children of color in our foster care system because parents do not take care of them, that also is guys, very disturbing.
We're getting
can we go back and get to the root cause of the trauma, though?
Yes. Can everyone just stop? I'm going to go with Josh for a second, and then we can all jump in after. I'll tell you when.
Okay.
Okay. So Josh, so far, I answered yes, disproportionately affected, but it was because they broke the law as written in the law of the land. Unless you can demonstrate that they were incarcerated during this war against drugs because they were black. Can you demonstrate that?
Okay, I don't care. I just told you I don't care about intention. I don't know why you keep pivoting to intention.
Because the claim of systemic racism, listen.
Nobody who talks about systemic racism cares about intention.
You haven't read enough philosophers and the people who are charging at the forefront of the movement of Black Lives Matter. You just haven't heard their arguments.
Here, can I try and steal, man?
You need racism in the country.
Not yet, Zurich. Not yet, Nivik. Just hold on. So Josh, if you make a claim that systemic racism still exists today, I'm asking you, what are you basing that claim on? What's your demonstration?
So we were just talking about the war on drugs, and then your response to the war on drugs was, well, it wasn't
demonstrated
how
that's evidence of systemic racism.
systemic racism doesn't require intention. I don't know what you do not get. Like, if a policy has a severe detrimental impact on a population, that is an example of a policy that is systemically affecting one group of people. That is what I consider, and what most people consider, systemic racism.
Josh, it is even everyone has to live under that law, including the white people who use drugs, because it's not only black people who use drugs. Everyone lands equally under that equal law.
But if there's more policing in poor neighborhoods and black people are more likely.
Do you know why there's more policing in poor neighborhoods?
Because of bigotry of policy.
Nivik.
Whoa.
Just shut up for a second and let Josh
I can answer the question. Because there's this disproportionate amount of crime.
Yes.
But correct. Why is there but why is there a disproportionate amount of crime in these in these poor communities? Because they're poor, and if you're poor, you're gonna
gerrymandering.
You're getting there. Now
gerrymandering.
The question of why now wait. You've gotten to poverty. Now we have to look at why the people are impoverished, but we also have to look at why do they think that they have the right, regardless of their financial situation, to break the law?
I don't know why you're looking at this from an individual level when we're talking about policies.
Because you started talking about incarceration.
Trav, you don't have to go there. Like, I think you're going down the wrong path. Because you could make the argument that blacks have historically been way more poor throughout this country.
That doesn't matter.
And
poor does not equal, from a moral stance, to do crime.
Right, but my point is that crime didn't increase until the 70s and 80s. And so I'm skeptical of the claim that poverty causes crime.
Yeah,
I can't even get past that.
No,
Travis.
Poverty, but inequality. That's just wrong. Inequality does cause crime.
Travis.
No. That's not what Richard Zurich just said.
He said poverty, but poverty implies inequality. So
and that's fine. So
Travis.
Yes, Nivik.
400 years of ideology of inequality within culture don't just disappear in a decade.
You can make that same argument for whites
Lee
being
Atwater,
enslaved, Nivik.
There's a connection there actually, and with the whole Civil War thing, because the ideology of inequality was about whites fighting against that ideology. It had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with blacks at all. It's been fought with whites for hundreds of years. That's really why they were against slavery against blacks, because it had to do with the ideology mindset. And Lee Atwater said that in a hidden camera that we have to promote racism and hatred against blacks in order to get votes. So that therefore must mean that you have aligning policies. That wasn't too far ago. That was very recent.
Nivik,
and gerrymandering is about taking away freedoms of blacks, by the way. It's about writing redistricting in encircling blacks and within an area so they have less representation, which screws them
again in
a negative way in the long run.
Let's stop with the
gerrymandering.
Point to the actual law that exists right now. The actual law, not so what someone said. The actual law that is systemically racist that exists in the West.
We keep saying it. I don't know why you keep
Name the law. Name the law. We'll pull it up.
You said gerrymandering, and I said the war on drugs. I don't know why.
Okay, the war on drugs is not a law.
Guys, you guys are talking
past each other.
You guys are talking past
each other because your standards are different. Trav is looking for specific words.
I'm not.
Black people, specific in. Like you guys were saying, intentionality against black people. And so we can take the gerrymandering law, which says nothing explicit about black people,
I'm talking about the source of where things are coming from. You need to control people. You need racism to control people.
I'm trying to support your argument.
You need racism to control
Nivek?
people, and that's what racism was
Nivek, you're
for.
speaking nonsense. You don't need racism to control people. Let
I'm
Zurich
trying
finish.
to support your argument, Nivek.
Yes, you do, because people were going against their interests in the
Nivek,
Civil War
stop
by
talking
citing...
over Zurich. Let Zurich finish.
You can use gerrymandering to enforce a sort of systemic racism by disadvantaging blacks within the voting population. Now, that doesn't mean that gerrymandering meets the standard that Trav has set out. Now, you can argue about the standard because you can both agree that gerrymandering can have the effect of systematically disadvantaging the power of black votes.
Guys.
But it doesn't say in the law that black people are less than or that they should be suppressed.
You guys, this is why you have to focus on the actual laws when
If
it
you
comes
have
to
less
this,
say,
because if the laws of the land change and say this thing is illegal all of a sudden, it's not that you just say, well, it's part of my culture, so I'm going to do it anyway. You have to obey to those laws that have been changed. It doesn't matter how much you dislike it.
Pangburn, a law is never going to say, okay, fuck black people, you're allowed to discriminate against them.
Well, they used
to say that when systemic racism existed, Josh. You need to read history, man.
I understand that, but I'm saying...
You just said it never is going to say that.
I'm saying in modern times, it's never gonna.
That's what Lee Atwater said. He said you can't come out and say the N-word, and you have to do. Yes,
you can. We used to be
no,
able to.
That's what he said in the hidden tapes. He said you can't just come out and say the N-word
Nivek,
and do
I don't
racial
care
things.
of the hidden tapes of this person. I don't care.
You have to do racist. You have to do racist things and say scapegoats of busing and what do you call it, food stamps and stuff like that.
That's conspiratorial thinking.
No, it's not conspiracy. He said that.
Nivek, I don't care if he said it's conspiratorial thinking to apply to the general.
You guys know what?
Everyone, let yoga go. Let yoga.
Not that your discussion wasn't interesting. I think it's interesting, but I just feel like this is rhetoric heavy.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to try my own take that I've been working on and get some feedback from that.
Mm-hmm.
I think my understanding of systemic is more like localized versus systemic. Like those two are opposite things. So if racism was localized to one part of our society, whether it be law or culture or whatever part of society, just by changing that one aspect of society, we would eliminate racism. But because we can't just choose one part of our society that has some racist tendencies or policies or what have you that are racist, that's why it seems systemic to me. If it was just in one part, it would be localized and it would be easier to change. But because it's a little bit in everything.
Right.
Okay, Yoga. I just want to ask you, what do you think it is in?
I think we just built our society and I think, are you in Canada?
Yep.
I'm in the US, so it might be different for us.
I understand the US arguments as well, definitely.
Totally. Well, coming from the US perspective, I just feel like our country and our policies have evolved from being dependent on being oppressive towards Black people to now trying to be an inclusive society. But I mean, it's reasonable to suspect we would
see. One thing I'll agree with you on, just to qualify something you said, is that over a history of oppression, there are going to be some reverberations within how that affected family lineages, of course. Now, what that is not evidence of, though, is that there is something, and look, millions upon millions, just so you guys know that it's not just some white cis males that only think this. Look at the Hodge twins and their following. Look at the black conservatives. Look at Thomas Sowell. There's a lot of philosophers. Look at what's his name? I had him on my podcast. young philosopher.
Coleman Hughes.
Coleman Hughes. Yeah. Look at Coleman Hughes.
He was on your podcast?
Sorry?
He was on your podcast.
Yeah, Coleman Hughes is on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So look at the young philosopher Coleman Hughes and how he talks about how what people are doing when it comes to systemic racism and mislabeling it based on his interpretation, mine, and millions of others, is they are not allowing the war of ideas to focus on the cultural issues that still exists in some black communities in the United States and also some white communities in the United States, some Asian communities. There happens to be more black communities with some of these cultural bugs that lead to higher rates of crime. But to point,
I have a question.
Just one sec, let me finish. But to point at a cultural issue, what I see as a demonstrable cultural issue, and say that's happening because of systemic racism, is a major disservice to the people who have found themselves in impoverished situations.
So there's no such thing as racism.
So can I just say?
No. Nice straw man, though. I want to, Josh, before you come in, I want Yoga to have a chance to respond.
Yeah, I've been listening to Coleman Hughes. I think he has some really good arguments, and I think he balances out. Like, I think the Black Lives Matter movement has yielded some important results and a conversation that is worthy of having in the States. That's crazy thunder. Sorry if you can hear the thunderstorm I'm in.
No worries, that's cool.
That was spooky. My
reminds
dog
me
just jumped over me.
That reminds me of back home, actually. We have crazy thunderstorms.
I'm from Michigan originally, and we used to get them, but since moving to Seattle, they haven't really been here, so it's surprising.
Right.
But sorry, back to it. Yeah, Coleman, I think there are very good criticisms of the left that I feel aware of and I think are important. But I think to just at the same time from the other side kind of minimize what we do, obviously cell phones and capturing footage from the last 5 years have blown this up, but there's definitely some illnesses in our society that we need to confront. I don't think.
Sure.
Okay, so can I just
add something?
Yeah,
that affects policy, by the way.
We'll go to Josh, then Nivik, and then Keegan. We'll welcome Keegan. So Josh first.
Okay, do you guys agree that Black people are disproportionately poor compared to other groups?
That's statistically true.
Okay, so either that outcome is due to oppression, or it's due to some inherent quality of future of being Black.
That's what we call a false. That's what we call a false.
Genetics.
That's what we call a false dichotomy, Josh.
Well, it's either nature or nurture.
No.
I would call that racism right there.
Wait, hold on. It's either nature or nurture. You can't
exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, it's not a false dichotomy. So it's not a false dichotomy.
You can have both. That's a false dichotomy again. Yeah.
That's what the right. There are people on the right that want to say that.
That's their whole point. Nivik, it's your turn now, Nivik.
Yeah, there are people on the right that want to say that, and how people are, what you call it, are personally affects policy. So you can't separate, and a lot of those policies are driven by bigoted sentiments, and it's not just that Black people won't move on. There's some people who won't move on from the past of racism.
But if you say there's no systemic racism, then you're saying it's all nature.
No, I'm not.
Whoever said Pangburn said
there's no evidence or demonstration of systemic racism still existing. This is what Thomas. This is what
exactly. So it's nurture.
So you need. So when you say nurture, yes.
I mean nature. I mean,
no. You see,
yes.
it's not just if we can't show that it's systemic racism, it just means that black people are fail at a higher rate. No.
Genetically inferior.
Listen, Nivik. Within this system, if you wish to make statistical arguments based on race, like you've decided that race is going to be the thing we look at, instead of looking at, let's say, high testosterone males. So almost every male who's incarcerated, and this is general, are high testosterone, low IQ, high testosterone. And we don't have low testosterone, high IQ, more males in black communities versus any other racial community. So we have to look at what are the reasons they're being incarcerated. Okay, so we look at all of them. We don't see any evidence of this mass, trying to keep the black man down. We have some isolated incidents where we can point at and say, it seems like there's something fishy going on here. And law enforcement's really good at investigating that, by the way. So we look at, okay, this person did commit this crime. So we have this collection of people who are incarcerated, and we find that it's more black males than white males, say, as an obvious comparison that people make. And then
Elites made that same argument.
And then we have to ask, why has this happened? We know that they committed the crime. We know that they're incarcerated. Then we have to ask, why did they commit the crime? What are the things that inform our actions? Well, we know our beliefs do. So, what exists within the belief system of people that commit crimes that we can actually make some general, we can draw some general lines to help us predict what these things are and help people in the future before they commit crimes.
Okay,
this is the kind of work that Thomas Sowell, Coleman Hughes, anyone who's actually looking and demanding that evidence be used to demonstrate claims, this is the work they're doing. Looking for those cultural bugs that lead to that. Go ahead, Nivik.
Release said the same thing about serfs in the past, that we're doing better than you, and is because that they simply had access to wealth. Nobles had access to wealth compared to serfs. They didn't have access to education, and they were oppressed, and they were under lords. So a lot of what blacks are going. No. Let me finish.
Slow down and try and make a point. Let me finish.
Please. So a lot of what you see, what is saying about them is what is saying about blacks. Feudal serfdom was transferred from.
Stop, Nivik. Stop for a sec. What
I was just saying, the inequalities are tied. What happened with feudal serfdom is transferred over into blacks. It had nothing to do with black people. Just let me finish.
No. I'm trying to keep. Just Richard, one sec. I'm trying to keep you on track.
I know. I understand. I'm getting there.
You made a claim. What do you think is similar between those two situations that we were talking about, that you brought up? Serfdom and the state of affairs today.
I'm talking about it not being about race. It's about the ideology of inequality. The ideology of equality was transferred from whites into blacks in the form of racism. After serfs after a revolt. That's what the Civil War was about. The Civil War was about that ideology. And whites were going. Let me finish. Please let me finish. They're going against their interests. The United States wanted to be created a different way. And the elites wanted the old monarchy way, and they're being divided along lines of race. They didn't want to be equated with black people. So one side was for the Civil War, and one side was against it. The pro-monarchy elites were aiding the people who were pro inequality, ideology of inequality. The ideology of inequality aligned with theirs of feudal serfdom, and they wanted to go back to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Richard.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Finish it.
Yeah, so it has to do with that in society.
So
I mean, like, yeah, a lot of what people were saying in the past against one group, what I mean is what they are saying is what they're saying now. This is, if you don't have certain access to something, yeah, you're less likely to be educated and stuff like that. That didn't mean that the serfs were inferior to the nobles and
This
monarchs.
has
They
nothing
actually
to do with crime.
they're
It
actually
has nothing to do
superior.
with what we're doing.
They were actually genetically superior to them because they screwed with incest. So they got sick, and they were actually less genetically superior to them.
Pangburn, the point he's making is that class has an effect on your belief systems.
yeah,
Your
and
belief,
that's
Of course it
That's
does. So just say
that's
that.
fine. So when you talk about this what is it? The ideology of inequality. So I want to learn more about this because it's intriguing to me. So could you tell me how you would define that and whether you believe I am governed by that ideology?
Whites used to look at other whites as another race, and they used to
Okay.
enslave other white people,
Yeah.
and it transferred from that into serfdom. And then there's like, hell no with this, we're not cool with that either, and they revolted against that, and then it went into then it transferred to race with blacks.
Yeah. That's okay. That's
And
fine.
then the United States, they were fleeing from that, and they were fighting against that. All men are created equal, freedom and justice, equality for all, unity, and the monarchs were like, "What the fuck is this? We're not that's against everything we believe, and that's just not going to fly." Revolutionary War fought. After that, you had the Civil. The Civil War was just a continuation of the Revolutionary. It was the ideology of inequality, and some people were going against that ideology of equality because they didn't want to be equated with black people. So you had them fighting alongside the monarchs. The monarchs aided the Confederacy. They were actually funding them and trying to help them to win the Civil War.
Yeah. Okay.
And it had so it was turning America into serfs. It was taking America down a direction that it didn't want to effing go. And and it was like, no, we didn't want that in the system. And it's actually the poor of Europe wanted the slavery gone. It wasn't about caring about slaves. It was about that mindset. They fought against it for centuries, way before black people, hundreds of centuries. You get what I'm saying? And they finally, around the Enlightenment period, got rid of it. And it was like, yes. And then it's like, you know what? This shit's got to go. And it was the people that was against the enslavement. It wasn't the monarchs or the elites.
Richard. Let Richard get in.
Yeah, I agree. So obviously the Union won, and so we could possibly agree that was a triumph against the ideology of inequality. But obviously inequality still exists today.
Of course.
So would you say that
it's still continuing? The fight never ended. It's still continuing.
Right. So is your ultimate goal to see an end to all inequality?
I mean, the perfect union, right? Is that the goal?
No.
Of the United States.
So I know what's gonna happen now. You're forcing us to say, no. We should minimize it as much as we can, but it shouldn't be zero, right? Because then we can't live within.
He's talking about communism.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm just asking you a question. I didn't mean to box you in.
No, I don't mind.
No, we shouldn't reduce it to zero.
Very well suited to being able to help illustrate how
of
the many cultures that find themselves in the United States, that we have room and awareness and
Hello?
There we go.
You got to mute. Okay, there we go.
Okay, well, sorry. Well,
why are you muting?
I guess let me rephrase the question so that it's not as...
Go ahead, I'll answer it.
So that it's more constructive.
Equality of opportunity.
Yeah.
Not equality, not a hand up, not a hand out, but a hand up type of system. Of equality of opportunity, upward mobility. So people could to not have a system, which what people are trying to do, they do it in slick ways, but that's pretty much what's going on, and a lot of it can be along lines of race or class.
Everyone has equal opportunity under the law in the West.
So, and that would be where I disagree.
Not really.
Yeah.
How?
So, this country is slanted right
give me your
of inequality. It's inequality. It's slanted right. The United States is
You can't
slanted
just
right of
say
inequality.
it is.
He's
Give me
right.
some evidence.
He's right about that.
It needs to be counterbalanced to the left a little bit, I think.
He's
you
right
know?
about that because America, when you compare America to Europe, it is the way America is designed is to promote more inequality. And what that
equality.
does,
You guys are missing this. If you're going
Okay.
to make a claim that it is unequal for a certain group, fucking demonstrate it with a demonstration.
Okay, I can.
Okay,
try,
let's hear
I
your
can
demonstration.
demonstrate
Go ahead.
that. I can demonstrate that.
Okay.
There are way more billionaires in this country than there are in any other country in the world.
So what?
There's way more wealth inequality.
It's not supposed to be that way.
My God. It doesn't matter if there are more billionaires. I'm talking about under the law of the land, you guys. Give me a demonstration how it's unequal.
Yeah, I'm not. That's not what we're arguing anymore.
We're arguing that sets the precedence of inequality. It's mostly on black people because you need them to divide people. You need.
What are you talking about? That's just that's
racism is used to control people.
Yeah, Keegan,
racism controls people.
Let Keegan go.
So I guess before, with regard to Grover Fasting, you said that more black people were jailed.
Say that again, Keegan. Sorry, you're a bit hard to hear.
During the war on drugs thing, more black people were jailed.
Yes.
Yeah. So
let's
go ahead.
switch that example and say, like right now, more men are jailed than women.
Right.
But you won't call that systemically sexist.
Yeah, exactly.
That's because this man did horrible stuff. So
yeah.
I want to ask Josh what's his...
It's about breaking the fucking law, guys. You haven't made one demonstration
I can't believe
how
you're
it's systemic racism. Just blah blah blah.
I can't believe you're comparing the male incarceration rate to the war on drugs. Like that's like insane to me.
No, it's not. The war on drugs has specific laws written into the book that have nothing to do with race.
Well,
of course it does.
It has
demonstrate it.
Crack cocaine, crack cocaine and cocaine. How's that?
What? That has nothing to do
crack
with
cocaine
race.
and cocaine. You get a bigger sentence with the crack than the cocaine.
Okay, you've just showed your fallacy. That's logically fallacious.
So Trav, let me jump in here because I have been having some second thoughts on the war on drugs because people who I respect, someone like John McWhorter, will say outright that we have to end the war on drugs. And I haven't done enough research to fully understand why he makes that claim. But I think it's something like it might be possible that with the state the black communities are in, with this cycle of poverty, jail, drug abuse, gangs, etc., the only way to loosen up that cycle is to take away certain restrictions on drugs. This is why it might be a good thing, and I don't completely agree necessarily with the methodology, but it might be a good thing that Oregon is going down the path of selectively taking away certain restrictions to maybe provide a better path out to black people. I liken it to the dynamic that went on with the prohibition in the 1920s, where when alcohol was banned, its production and consumption exploded. Now, I'm not educated enough to say why that happened, if the same reasons are applicable to drug usage, but I think it is a possibility that the war on drugs and the strictness with which that has been dealt with has been detrimental to the black community.
Yeah, that's a different argument than whether there's a systemic precedent behind it. That regardless of how the laws affect whatever racial group you want to select, because you can find laws that are harder on Asians than they are on anyone else.
Asian
racism.
Asian history and black history is completely different.
It doesn't matter what the history is when we're talking about what the laws currently are. Jesus.
Yes, history plays a role.
God,
Trav, you have to get past the law.
I just have to chime in really quick. I'm going to
Yoga.
have to take off soon. And I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan of Richard. And I hope that we can have a focused debate or discussion on racism or a specific topic soon. But I will have to go soon. So I hope you.
Thanks, Yoga.
I agree. It was lovely to meet you. I hope we can talk again.
Yeah, please do come back. We do have conversations on that to talk about racism all the time. So please do come back.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye, Yoga.
Okay, so I think like there's a difference between like males being incarcerated at a higher rate than at a higher rate because like males aren't being incarcerated because they're poor, right? They're being incarcerated because they're more likely to.
The same as
they're more likely to like. You can just like you can like reduce it to like a biological propensity.
No. That's a failure. They're being incarcerated, Josh, because they broke the law. No other reason, because they broke the law.
Well, Trav, that's a bit of a reduction.
The inequality within the system made them more likely to break the law.
But
Richard,
Trav,
the laws are set up that way. If you want to talk about what the cultural aspects are that lead them to break the law, or their moral foundation that has a hole in it that allows them to justify breaking the law, we can talk about that. But don't put any of it on the system if you can't demonstrate.
Yeah, and I'm not. But I'm just trying to get this conversation to where we can agree on the standard of systemic racism, because neither side is moving, and that is causing both of us to talk past each other. Because one side is only wanting laws, and the other side is only wanting outcomes.
So
and that isn't going to get us anywhere.
Wait a sec.
Richard?
Guys, if it's as simple as this, it's not anything outside of this. This is how claims are evaluated. You make a claim, and then you demonstrate the claim. So far, no one has demonstrated that systemic racism still exists. Let's say in the United States, you're making these claims about statistical realities, and then you're saying those are realities because of systemic racism.
Okay.
So can I just say the problem with
correlation issue.
This is the problem. We live in a deterministic world, right?
Sure. Yes.
So you can say, let's say if a black person commits a crime, you can say, well, his moral foundations were caused him to do so, but his moral foundations are
predetermined.
Are affected by his environment, right?
Yes.
So if there's a policy that can change the environment to change his moral foundations, then
you don't understand determinism, brother.
Yes, exactly.
You don't understand.
Josh,
everything is predetermined.
Redlining example.
Josh, let me ask you this, because you would say that you agree with the statement that systemic racism exists.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, can you put that statement into other words for me, so that I can better understand what you're claiming?
It's pretty simple. It's just policy has can affect the outcome of certain populations, either positively or negatively, and it's as simple as that. I mean, and if a policy negatively harms a certain population, I would consider that systemic racism. And it doesn't even have to affect a population in one very narrow specific way. I mean, usually these policies, they have kind of like a trickle down effect, or not trickle, but they have like the effect is bigger than what it appears. So like if you're poor, you're less likely to be educated. If you're less likely to be educated, less likely to climb up in the social economic ladder. So these, it's not just like, or if you're fatherlessness, if you incarcerate a bunch of fathers, that's going to have a big effect on children, and future generations.
Guys.
So
Yes, I agree. So
people aren't choosing to incarcerate fathers. No one's choosing to do that. They are breaking the law.
What about redlining?
Oh my God.
You put money in. You don't put money in black areas. You let it starve.
Bullshit.
No, that's
Nivek,
proven.
Look at how money is invested in that way. Look at what Barack Obama tried to do with the South Side of Chicago, and he fucking failed.
No, I'm talking about through history, though.
Pangburn, all you need to do is acknowledge that policy can affect people's belief system.
Right, and we do,
They're stuck in this idea that, okay, but they chose to break the law. But it's like, okay, but if the policy changed, then maybe they wouldn't break the law.
Well, no, but that's not always going to be the case, because your original statement of what systemic racism meant is that if a policy has any negative effect at all.
No, not any negative effect. No,
that's what you said. So you can.
It has okay, I can restate.
Go ahead.
Any negative effect would be crazy. I mean, technically policing has a negative, effect on black people in terms of discrimination.
Because they're breaking. Oh my God, discrimination! Really, you're gonna paint that? No, not gonna happen, man.
What?
Not gonna happen.
I was just agreeing. I was agreeing with you.
Policing has what? A negative effect on what?
If there was no police officers, by definition, black people wouldn't be discriminated. But we need police officers.
There is no police discrimination. What are you talking about?
No, you're not understanding me. I'm saying, okay. So, is there ever a situation where a black person gets discriminated? Is there one example of a black person getting discriminated?
It's possible, but it's not demonstrated that there's any police systemic racism.
Okay. I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying
it's
discrimination.
Possible, just like against someone who's white.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm actually giving you like an argument. I'm just saying that just because there is a policy has an effect on a certain group doesn't mean we need to get rid of the policy. So, for example, here's like one example: policing, right? So, policing. Let's just hypothetically, let's just say that policing has a negative effect on a disproportionate effect on black people. That doesn't mean we'll get rid of the police, right? So, I'm granting you the argument, right? Just because a policy has an effect on a certain population doesn't mean we get rid of the policy. It just means we have to get rid of the harmful aspects of the policy. We have to minimize the negatives while increasing the positives. So the capitalism is good, right? We don't want to get rid of capitalism, right? But we need to reduce the negatives of capitalism. And capitalism brings a lot of benefits to society. So we need capitalism, but we need to reduce the negatives of capitalism, right? So
you're presupposing that there are negatives of capitalism when you're really talking about how capitalism can be used for bad. That can't be blamed on capitalism.
I don't think that's a helpful distinction, Trav.
Reagan brought drugs in the U.S.
Let's bypass that. But because I understand that distinction, but you can take all forms of government, and then you can make the claim all of them cause positive and negative effects. Is that okay?
No. So, there are some that, regardless of how well you operate them, the negative effects will still be there. For instance, if you had and I mean negative from my moral foundation. For instance, if you had a government that said, like Saudi Arabia, it's legal in these certain areas to throw homosexuals off buildings, I would say that under no circumstances, under that governing law or ideology that law is based around, is good.
Well, you wouldn't say that ideology brings about no positive things at all.
Yes, I would. Under the example I just gave.
But the fact that the same ideology, granted that it causes that atrocious enactment of law.
Well, if killing can I just say one thing? If killing homosexuals decreases the rate of STDs, that would be a positive in one very specific sense, right?
And
if it did,
that's all I'm saying. Okay, but that's all I'm saying. But that's all I'm saying. Most, I'm just saying that like most policies, most systems have positive and negative effects, and you have to say, okay, we should weigh these negative and positives to.
So guys, I'm talking about not just the effects. I'm talking about if it's written into the law that
not law, man. It's sentiment makes law. Sentiment makes laws.
Or if it's written into, let's say, fascism, that let's say it's written into fascism, that all Jews will be incinerated, just as a hypothetical system. Then that
MTV.
It can't be written into law.
MTV, I was watching it, and in that time they wouldn't put black artists on, and white artists were complaining about that. There's like, what the hell? Why you keep doing that? You need to do that more. It was about the society more not wanting it. So policy, how people feel, make policy, and a lot of those policies have racial intent behind it. Reagan brought drugs into the country while arguing against war on drugs.
So you think Reagan brought drugs into the country? And how did that have
for black neighborhood? He didn't care about war on drugs and crime. It was more about putting negativity at blacks in order to pass trickle down economics. It's about inequality. It's about inequality. It's about inequality with economics of letting economic policy pass and people being cool with that in exchange for racism. That's what the reality is.
In what
that
way
is
did
true.
Reagan bring drugs into the country?
You didn't listen to what I just said, though. People exchange being okay with racism, so economic inequality would get a pass. That's all it's about.
No,
that's what.
And also,
because this country was really social in the past.
Nivek, you've claimed
it's possible to write race into legislation. People could have literally race whatever, but it wouldn't be able to do it.
You're breaking up a bit there, Josh. Is that Couture that's coming through?
Yeah, it might break it up.
No.
I think we should talk about race. To be honest,
Nivek,
we shouldn't be talking about race.
I just want you to qualify. Why did you say we shouldn't be talking about race?
Because I think people go to their corners.
No, they don't. They just don't. Okay. That's a myth, and especially not here. We actually value strong evidence on this Discord. And then
I give logic. I give logic. I can't give you a fact evidence. I'm just saying, like, if you say to folks, we can't use the N-word or race, or just come out and say things with the Lee Atwater. What else would he mean but putting negative policies to hurt blacks? And that's what the Republican Party does.
So Nivek,
say that
Nivek,
was there an element of racism with Trump?
I want you to
qualify. Element of racism with Trump?
You to qualify. You made a claim that Reagan brought drugs into the United States. Tell me how you think he did that.
The people who he was funding in South America were dealing in drugs to finance themselves. They're bringing drugs into the country.
So you think that it's intellectually honest
and guns
to infer from or to make the claim from that Reagan actually brought drugs into America? That's dishonest.
It was about economics. He didn't want competition from companies coming from other nations.
That's intellectual
so he went along.
So he went. That doesn't to make that claim. What you should have claimed.
It's not about race, man. It's about income. It's about class inequality.
Is that Reagan
race
supported through finances some bad people that brought drugs into the? It's just really intellectually dishonest to say that.
It's about class inequality. It has nothing to do with race. We shouldn't even be talking about race. Race is used to manipulate people against their own interests. That's how they were being used throughout this country's history. And blacks are the totem pole when it comes to that. That's how come I don't really like talking about it. And it's true. It is there, but people don't want it. People skirt around it. So I'd rather just talk about the reality of cause and effects with inequality and stuff like that. I don't really like talking about like.
Okay, well,
because those things govern things. It's about inequality system. This country leans right, and they use social things to control people.
No, they don't.
And
no, they don't. There's not a big evil man at the top of this totem pole that's doing this. It's just
Do you know what
you use race to control people?
It's a myth.
You don't use race.
Pangburn, have you heard of
you control people through race? How's 100%? So everybody there's nobody on the right that has there's nothing to do with race. People that vote on the right,
what
at all?
No,
and
the right wing is inhabited by tens of millions black people.
Trav, well, why are they KKK guys and Nazi guys on that side? Why aren't they on the left?
And why do you have Antifa and Black Lives Matter on the other side?
I mean,
I'm not a commie. So.
Trav, I would I often claim that the Democrats use race to their political advantage because what they've done.
Yes, I agree they do.
But why were you disagreeing with Nick's claim?
Because I'm disagreeing within the context of what he was talking about. He's talking about the top-down evil organization, men that want to keep things down and keep things racially separated and keep the race wars going. It's like that within that context, that is just a myth.
Oligarchs.
The old
There's
myth.
No such thing. People want oligarchism in this country.
Have you heard of COINTELPRO? Have you heard of that conspiracy?
No.
I think I fixed my mic. Am I coming in?
Yeah, you're coming in now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The people who fought on the side of the Civil War wanted an inequality system. They were benefiting off of slaves. They were raking in dough. They wanted that type of inequality system within the U.S. and they were governing along those lines. It wasn't really about racism with them.
We're talking about
and that culture has never left the U.S. It's been with it from the beginning, and it's to it now. And to say it just disappeared, okay.
Nivik.
Point I just want to make earlier was
just one sec, Arcouture. Let's let Zombie go.
You're claiming that Reagan brought drugs in, and that's ridiculous conspiracy theory BS, in my opinion. True racism, you have to break it down into individuals' experiences. Okay, I'll give you a piece of racism that equated to an individual I know that I ended up being married to for almost 30 years, walking into a corner store in Washington, D.C. to get an application to get an apartment above the grocery store. And he asked Mr. Chang, can I have an application? I see you have an opening. And he said no. And then his white girlfriend walking in 5 minutes later and saying, can I have an application to get an apartment? And he said, yes. And then the two of us filling out this application and getting an apartment, and an individual saying, after we rented for over a year, saying you were our best tenants we ever had. Now, that is such a blatant piece of racism. And so you have to break those down in individual instances. Now, you can't tie Reagan to selling drugs. It needs to be brought down into small instances.
No, can I just say one thing?
Okay, they do that with housing.
Look, I found an article.
We can do it with housing. We can do it with
people.
A lot of things.
People devalue houses when it's of a black person more.
Okay, hey guys, this is an interview.
They also devalue houses that don't smell like chocolate chip cookies.
Guys,
spread, dude.
Yes. Guys, this is an interview with one of Richard Nixon's top advisors. Okay, this is what he said. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people.
And guess what?
That's an opinion.
You guys weren't even born.
He implemented policy based on it.
That was his top advisor.
I'm just telling you, there's probably one person in this chat that was born in '68, and I happen to still be in diapers.
Okay. By the way, I watched the video with the lady that
moved forward.
I watched a live video where a woman, she wanted her house appraised, and she put black pictures in there, and the appraiser came in. The appraiser came in. and gave her a low score. Then she and then they got and then she switched it up with white pictures, and the house was appraised way much more. No, it wasn't long ago.
Wait, how do you move on if the
You
policies
can
are still in
YouTube
place?
Hey,
This is what-
you guys.
How do you move on
2
if the policies are still in place? Like, get rid of the policies. That's all I argue for.
Redlining.
Right, and
yes.
the policies are not
Redlining.
still in place. That's the thing. So
the whole drug war is in place. That's a DEA.
Well,
That's everything.
I agree that the drug war needs to be eradicated for not reasons of it keeps the black man down, not for
and
gerrymandering, racial disparity.
You know what?
And it had a measurable
I
impact.
don't think
Gerrymandering.
anybody in law enforcement really gives a shit whether we have to arrest somebody for personal use drugs or not.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what?
guys,
we don't care.
You're
if
not.
It's a law. It's a law. So remove the laws, and then they won't be enforced.
Exactly.
Wait, can I just say one thing? This is what else he said. This is another thing he said. The top advisor. We knew we couldn't make it legal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt both those communities. Cool. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about
and this is 1968, right?
But also it doesn't matter.
Right?
Weren't the Republicans penalized for targeting?
They didn't even like rock and roll in 1968, dude. What the fuck are you talking about?
Let me say something here. That I would never make the claim that there is no racism out there. The claim is, and that means individuals can be racist. It can happen. But if you're, giving an anecdote like you've constantly been giving, Nivik, which you should really research what anecdotes are, because you're just an anecdote spewer on here.
How about me?
Just listen.
I quoted somebody.
Somebody. No, Josh, I'm just speaking generally.
Right, Josh, but it was from freaking 1968.
But let me say that's still an anecdote, Josh. No. But now just wait, you guys. Okay, now anecdotes are of instances, particular instances that might be instances of racism, right? Those anecdotes aren't doing a fucking thing for you to add to demonstrating that systemic racism still exists. This isn't a topic that that modern day philosophers and economists and people who understand statistical analysis take lightly. They've desperately
How can systemic racism not exist?
Can I just say, if I implement a policy to affect a particular group, how the fuck is that an anecdote?
No, that would be evidence of systemic racism, which does not exist in the system today.
If racism exists, then how can systemic racism not exist? That's impossible.
Wait, but wait, the thing is, like, you seem to be saying that, you say, black people, like you have to put it in law, like, black people can't do this, white people can't do that. That's illegal. That's impossible to put that into legislation. So they have to code it in a way, like Nixon, to implement it, and it has measurable effects. And you have the quotes.
No.
Like, what would you need to prove that systemic racism exists if you could prove it exists?
The state right now is black people are feeling a lot of racism, even from black people.
Right.
Okay. They are getting hit from both sides. Now,
the black conservative is being called an Uncle Tom by Black Lives Matter leaders.
My own child has been called an Uncle Tom for expressing opinions that are contrary to mainstream.
That's not systemic racism. That's
bullshit. That's fucking racism. It's straight up.
It's not systemic. It's not
relevant at all.
But Josh,
how would that mean that systemic? How would that mean systemic racism doesn't exist if a couple black people said a bunch of bad things? It literally is unrelated.
Yeah, good. Apply that same logic.
That's not in policy, though.
Apply that same logic. Now, Nivik, you have to demonstrate that it's policy that exists today. My argument is that systemic racism does not exist today within the policy. It's all.
But they implemented policies that still exist today. So it is policy.
What policy?
The entire drug war, the DEA,
the DEA,
the way they.
the war on drugs is enforced equally across races. Dum.
Go.
No, there's disproportional effects between minorities and other people.
Hey,
deliberately.
Let's take Josh's
society.
Just time out, guys.
Not having representation.
Let's take Josh's logic and apply it to pedophiles. Josh,
no.
If there are more pedophiles who are black that happen to be incarcerated for breaking the law against pedophilia, what does that mean?
Can you repeat? Sorry, can you repeat what you said? I wasn't listening.
Josh, if the laws against pedophilia happen to affect blacks more than whites when it comes to incarceration rates, what does that mean?
That is completely.
Hold on.
It means they're more black.
Josh, answer.
I'll answer. I'll answer. It means they're more. It means they're more.
That I think
that just 2 seconds, Zombie. After Josh answers. 2 seconds.
So that means they're more black pedophiles, right?
Yes.
So that means black people are more biologically disposed to.
Oh my God!
No, it doesn't. You are the worst caller.
Wait, stop. Can I finish?
You are crazy. That is so funny.
Dude, that's fucked. You see this as a false dichotomy, this whole thing. Think of the other reasons why. You think it's a racial thing because you're addicted to race.
No. You can also
Could I answer that question?
Sure, go ahead.
Here's the thing. Like, my point is, why is it that minorities are prosecuted way harsher, but the usage of drugs and all of that is all the same? So I'm saying, like,
it's cultural. I'll tell you why.
It's not cold. No.
Yes.
It's the use of black. No. Here's what I'm saying. The use of the drugs, the amount of times a crime is committed is exactly the same, but the enforcement towards minorities is way more. And the people behind it, the policy knew it was going to happen, and you can measure it with statistics.
Black people aren't coming from no other country. They're from the United States.
Listen.
They're not bringing no culture into the United States. They're of America. Black Americans are Americans.
Can I answer your question?
Culture is irrelevant.
Can I answer your question, Pangburn? Yeah. If black people are more likely to be pedophiles, okay, it's either it can let's say it's a culture. Let's forget about the genetics. Okay, let's just say it's a culture. Let's just say
Thank you.
Let's just say it's a cultural thing, right? Okay, that culture comes. The culture comes from somewhere, right? It doesn't just appear out of nowhere, right? So you can say perhaps there were certain policies that influenced that influence certain environmental outcomes that influence the culture. Like I don't know what.
No. Hold on a sec. Pedophilia is a disorder of the mind, and we have morally categorized it as that. But it is actually a sexual attraction to children. So we have.
It is biological.
You're focusing.
Which one is it?
Just wait. You're focusing on the wrong thing.
Let's argue genetics.
It's so bad. You just said it was biological.
Let's just argue genetics.
No. It's.
I'm actually gonna jump off the.
Some far right wingers argue genetics. So let's just argue genetics.
So Josh,
can I challenge each of these young men to do something?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like you to go, I don't know where you live, go to your county, and it's public information, and pull up all of the individuals who are in your county jail system. And I don't care if you do a little tick mark or whatever, and look for people that are in there for only a drug offense. Only a drug offense. No parole or probation violation sanction, no other offense whatsoever. And you tell me what the race of those individuals are.
No, what if the parole? That's exactly the point, though. It could be drugs, and then they're going to break the parole.
No, exactly. It's about the approach, how to solve a problem. That's what we're exactly. And it's about the approach to solve a problem.
Is that there is no one in any of your county jail systems for only a personal use drug offense, and there hasn't been for about 15 years. And so this conversation that the far left keeps having.
We understand.
Over all of
Listen,
these people in jail and prison for only personal use drugs is a fallacy. Because
but if I have a
that's
policy,
not the case.
But if
It's
I have
about the
policy,
approach
you
to
guys
the
have your
problem.
fucking noses up your bugolios.
No, you're approaching things the wrong way. You're seeing things not the way that they really are.
Yeah, no, the other like, what if they have a parole violation for a drug related crime, and then it spirals into more crime? That's how it
In
works.
order to solve a problem, you have to
No,
approach it the
no,
right
no,
way.
no,
You're not
no.
approaching the problem
That's
the right
cart
way.
before the horse. There is the what's
No.
the first? What's the first? The chicken
Wait,
or
guys,
the egg?
can I go back to the pedophilia example?
Yeah,
You have to-
they smoke, like, if they smoke weed.
Get your butt out of your nose,
Go on.
though.
Wait, Pangburn. So you just admitted that it is. You just admitted that it is about that you were born a pedophile, right?
So wait. So people are born with the genetic predisposition to pedophilia.
Exactly.
Some people will grow up and they'll be able to stifle it, even though it's there a little bit. But when people seem to get over a certain hump, they just can't help themselves. And that's basically what we know so far about pedophilia in the brain. So now wait. Josh, let me qualify something.
Yeah.
Let me say that those pedophiles who are incarcerated, where you have more blacks in this hypothetical, it's not because they're black that they are incarcerated. It's because
some people believe that.
Pedophiles.
Exactly, it's because they were targeted for being
So
black.
what accounts?
Some people believe that.
I'm asking, what accounts for the disproportionate the disproportionate pedophilia in one community versus another? I'm asking, what accounts for that difference?
It could be
that's actually the point, though.
Like of
if
the time.
It's either genetics.
No, that's actually the point, though. That's actually the point. That if there's a disproportionate amount of a certain kind of race in a prison, it is not because that race has any disposition to that crime. That's because it's disproportionately enforced. So you're kind of making my point for me.
Policy or genetics? Pick one.
Do you even know the difference between a jail and a prison?
Yes.
So you guys,
you go to jail, then you go to prison next. You go to jail, then you go to prison. Prison's where you're held long term.
If a white supremacist was here, he'd argue genetics.
Listen,
if a white supremacist was here, he'd argue genetics.
Listen for a sec. Let Zombie finish. Zombie.
What is the difference between jail and prison? You're in jail before you usually get convicted of a crime, or you're only doing time in a jail system for local
This is a non sequitur. This is a non sequitur.
Policy or genetics?
Yeah. Let's answer that question.
You have to pick one.
Oh my God!
Why is there disproportionate?
You're not getting it. But stop throwing out stuff that you don't understand.
Just let's. Okay, so Josh, go ahead. What were you coming in with?
Okay, if the outcomes, what accounts for the different outcomes between two groups, and let's say, in any.
So you're asking. So Josh, within the hypothetical I painted, you want to know if there's anything racially based as to why you're seeing the discrepancy with so many pedophile blacks for so many pedophile whites, right? You're asking.
No. I'm just asking what accounts for that disparity. I'm just asking a simple question. What accounts for that?
Like in my hypothetical?
Yes.
Yeah. So the disparity itself, when focusing on it, it may or may not have anything to do with race. That has to be measured. But if you are going to make that claim, you have to demonstrate it, because when you break up into a racial statistic, caricature, you just said how? It's not my fucking problem because I'm not the one making a positive claim that race has anything to do with it.
People do. People do.
Setting some kind of standard to accept whether it's true or not.
Some people do. Some people argue that.
What accounts for the disparity? Answer the question.
I don't know. We just know that the disparity is there in that.
So it's
hypothetical.
Here's my point, though. I'm saying like if it does say it does exist, how would it be true to you? Like to you, what would be convincing to you if systemic racism exists?
So listen. Now, wait. Okay, now you're going to systemic racism, but let's stick within this hypothetical for a second. It could be the case that at this point in history, we have had more blacks acting out on their pedophilic tendencies than any other race. That could be the case. That's why we would have to go in and actually try to figure out what the actual answer is, as opposed to sitting back and saying, well, it must have something to do with their race, because look at the racial statistical differences.
But then you have to
that's exactly what I proved isn't the case with drug usage and everything. It's all the same.
During the Great Depression, whites more committed crime with bank robberies and stuff. Was so it based on the situation of the environment. So that's why I say it's either policy or it's race. Some white supremacists argue it's race.
It's not either or.
And I wish I want a white
Pangburn.
supremacist on this talk so he could argue why he believes it's race. So I want to hear how it's genetically that way, because that's the argument that some people put forward in a lot of comment sections. They say it's that they're genetically that way, and I was like, I'd love to hear an explanation from a person that believes
why we have other
Yeah, but I'm saying though, you can measure that races commit drug offenses the exact same rate, but the enforcement is way higher. That's my point.
Explain that to you?
Yes.
So when you say, but enforcement is way higher, you then cannot just conclude it's because of race. You have to go and look at the reasons why. And here are some of them. In certain circles of black culture, anti-police rhetoric has been promoted to children. And when people are being arrested for drug offenses, the stacking of additional offenses on top of that drug arrest is what you're talking about.
Okay, but where is that?
And then when you ask why, it has to do with how certain cultures act when being arrested versus others.
But
I have another factor. I have another litigating factor. What about money? Like it's money. It's like minorities. They have less money. Like if you look at it, they have less money because
to black people. So what are you talking about?
No, I'm saying minorities are black people are in a minority category. But if you look,
it doesn't matter. You were talking.
It doesn't matter.
No. You don't understand logic. You are fucking up the categories. You're making a categorical error.
Travis, minorities in this country have been discriminated along all lines of religion, of being Irish or Italian.
Nivik, you are riding on a thin line right now with your non sequiturs. I'm going to give you this warning right now. You are suffering from bad faith and unhelpfulness. So that's your first warning. Okay. So careful with the non sequiturs. Careful with the interruption. Go ahead, Josh.
Does class? So you made a cultural argument, right? And okay, does class affect culture?
It can.
Okay, so let's just say there's a policy that we can implement to affect class in a certain population that will affect the culture.
It can.
That will create a positive feedback loop where the class, where a more positive culture is created by the.
It can.
Yeah.
But it's not always going to work out that way, because people.
It's a great social experiment, but what's happening right now is our black and brown people are getting killed at a much higher rate. Ever since we've enacted in my state no charges against personal use drugs.
Oh,
our homicide rate is up higher than it has been the last 30 years.
Okay,
what happens if that's the unintended consequence, and now all the black men are getting killed off?
So I
want to counter Pangburn on that. So here's what I'm saying though, is it's if you look at it, like black people, they were enslaved, right? So then they're going to be generationally there's going to be less wealth in the family as it's passed down. I mean, that's measurable. I mean, there's no real disagreement.
Not necessarily.
They weren't enslaved.
No, Jesus Christ, man! Watch the straw man.
By the way, after slavery, blacks were doing positive things.
I didn't say they weren't enslaved, but not all blacks came out of slavery with a whole lot of problems. A lot did very good very quickly.
And they were attacked for it. They had neighborhoods that were burned down. And they had this one they called the Black Wall Street, and
there were some very
there's a lot of riots. Most riots were against blacks throughout U.S. history, actually.
Nivik, there were.
Wait, so my point though is saying that you're not saying that you're not even at a disadvantage if you have been. I'm saying you're at a disadvantage.
That's a straw
man. Okay, well, I'm trying to find out what you're asking.
Can I ask a question? How could the country make a lot of money off slavery, off of blacks, but after slavery, blacks didn't make a lot of money when they were the people making the damn money in the first place?
What?
I didn't get it.
I said if a lot of money was made off of blacks in slavery, how come after slavery black people didn't make a lot of money since they were the workers in the first place?
Some black
you
people
get what I'm saying?
have made a lot of money. You don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that was put a stop because of racism.
No, a lot of black people have done very well, and they continue to do very well.
Nowadays,
you are being racist, Nivik.
No, they were oppressed after slavery,
so I'm pointing out, though, is inarguably at a generational disadvantage. Inarguable.
Nivik, I'm going to say that you're not even covertly racist. I think you're overtly racist.
Yeah, you
don't even get it.
You think the black man is just so low and down and all this stuff? I know many black conservatives that have done way better things with their life than you may ever do.
The fact that you guys
do you think if you're black in our communities and you speak eloquently that you are talking white? I mean, that's the kind of shit you're spewing, dude.
I don't believe blacks are inferior. I believe that they had options. They had options of doing good after slavery because they were the breakers.
I'm not trying to slam you. I'm just trying to
I don't mind.
Get in your head a little bit and wonder how you think this way. Like you're categorizing individuals as groups really negatively.
Yeah,
that's a positive way. I said, how come after slavery they didn't do good?
Nivik, you've slammed all white people 17 times in this conversation.
No, I don't believe in race.
To do this.
I don't believe in race, bro. I don't believe in race.
Well, then
that's good.
I believe it's a social construct. So say that I'm this or I'm that, I don't see it. And I can give you a logical explanation of why. Ask me why I don't believe in race. Ask me that question.
Fine.
Nivik, you're not speaking you're not speaking the same language as us. Colloquially, we understand the races to be different. We have Asian races. We have people with brown skin. We have these racial categories that
they're similar in many ways genetically.
And for you to say you don't believe in those categories,
and they're similar in many ways. Is there a short race? Is there a fat race? Is there a zero blood type race?
Pangburn,
by the way, if you need an organ donor,
I have a question for Pangburn. So,
if you need an organ transplant, I can be more genetically
if they're enslaved and segregated, that there's no generational impact to that at all.
Say that again.
So let's say, so black people, they're enslaved, they're segregated. There's no question that some people can, but you're saying that. You're saying that there's going to be no generational disadvantage to that on a mass scale.
For some people,
if one people start at a lower area, I know some people do better.
Some people just look at the law of the land, obey the law, and build great things for them and their family. Okay. And black people can do that just as well.
The KKK came out.
Listen, Nivik, black people can do that just as well as any other race can.
But most people can't do that if you're being fucked over.
Bullshit. Most
the
KKK
came out. The KKK came out with marches to oppress black people.
I don't give a fuck.
After they were.
The KKK are this little tiny.
No, they were large. Did you see the march on Washington? There were thousands of them.
Travis,
thousands of them out of a fucking population.
Travis, you already agreed way earlier that there was systematic racism before.
So we're not talking about that anymore, Zurich.
But I was talking about 1890s KKK because Nivik is talking about after the Civil War.
1890s KKK membership. Let's look it up right now. Let's see how many they were.
It's really low nowadays.
No, the 1890s KKK, I'm saying.
After Civil War.
You guys need to fucking try listening instead of talking because most of you in this conversation don't have a fucking clue what logic is. And you've demonstrated it live on the air to everyone on fucking YouTube.
Wait, what did I say that? Well, how about me? What did I say that was Incorrect. I've never.
You can go back and listen on the tape and learn logical formation and see if you were logically consistent. So 1890s KKK membership. Let's see how many there were in the whole country.
Okay, so here's my argument. Let's say let's say you got like there's two people in a race, right? And then one person got sabotaged before, let's say got beaten up, right? And then they still, trained, and then they beat the other person. Like, there's no question that, yeah, you could do better, but recognizing disadvantage does not mean you can't succeed. It means it's going to have a measurable effect.
Bullshit.
And people took advantage of. No, I just want to make my point. Sorry, and I'm saying that Nixon aid that actually one person cited, he knew that was true. He knew that minorities have less money, and he even put in places certain guidelines for law enforcement and certain programs to enforce laws in a certain way.
Yeah,
and they went they went after them. I agree. Yeah, so I'm saying,
so focused on minorities. He should have focused on people who are actually impoverished. It's wrong to focus on racial minorities. It's wrong to
exactly, and that system. And I'm just saying that system is still in place and measurable effect to the day. Look, it's not. How's it not?
Show me.
It's not in place.
I don't see it.
All the studies, you can see them.
Not true.
It's just not true, man. I challenge you to listen to philosopher Coleman Hughes, philosopher Thomas Sowell,
Confederacy flag,
who do it.
So they're not disproportionately incarcerated today.
That are
That's not
dated
true.
2015 to current. Show us some current studies. 2015 to current.
So things are cause and effect.
You don't have any, dude.
Things are cause and effect. So where did it go?
Wait. So you're saying that minorities are not disproportionately incarcerated? Minorities are not disproportionately incarcerated today?
For the war on drugs? For the war on drugs?
Yeah,
no.
For the war on drugs. For drug crime. Okay, I could show them. I mean, I don't have them memorized right here,
drugs.
but it still exists to this day.
She said not for personal use drugs. I just want to read something. Stefan Jetzer, you're talking about how anthropologists and biologists talk about race. Yeah, we're talking about colloquial usages of race. Like when people say on the news, what was the race of the man? Or what was the race of a woman? We have colloquial language. We have usages of words. That's how we're using it. We're not in the science lab talking about the human race. That's not what we're doing. That's a straw man because you're not taking into consideration the context of this conversation and the fact that we actually stated how we colloquially use this. We're not talking about the human race. I only think there's one race, man. The human race. Yeah, that's scientifically true, but we're talking about the colloquial usage of race. Like on your ID, on your birth certificate, we have race.
Wait, Pangburn, I have a question. If there's a policy, just curious, let's just talk about the outcomes. If there's a policy that can
define race.
If there's a policy that will reduce inequality, is that a good policy?
That will reduce inequality.
Yeah, and there's no
policies should not giving everyone equal opportunity should be a goal. Yes.
Oh yeah, so a policy that increases opportunity is good, right?
Equality of opportunity, yes,
is good, right? Okay, so can we just say systemic racism is when we there are policies that are put in, or let's just say the lack of policies that increase opportunity.
That's a failure of language. What you need to look at.
I just have one simple question.
Is you need to say, is there something within the law that says one race can do X and the other race can't? That would be that's
gerrymandering.
Because we had those laws until the civil rights movement. That was systemic racism. Words mean something, folks.
But even in the war on drugs, I can intend to harm a certain group without actually writing in the law, we need to discriminate against black people.
So demonstrate that the war on drugs had that intent, and it wasn't the intent to just end drug use.
don't get
poor.
No,
They're more
the
poor.
quote, the Nixon aid and the quote. You didn't hear that?
Drugs.
No, you guys
They're
are
going to sell
The
drugs.
Nixon administration said so. They wanted to vilify minorities on the news.
You're in a loop of cynicism, guys. It's.
Wait, I don't understand. I don't understand that we have the quotes though.
The Nixon did say that. He says
confused as to what systemic racism is versus institutionalized racism.
The same thing.
For those
no,
following,
it's not the same thing.
For those on
it's the same
YouTube
thing.
right now, if you want to hear more of this conversation, please come over to the Discord.
It's laws, rules, and orders.
I will drop the Discord link for you. Oh, it's already in the chat, so you guys will find the Discord link. But do join us over on Discord because I'm going to shut down the YouTube stream. Make sure you subscribe to the new channel, the Pangburn Offensive. That's where these
we're on
chats
YouTube?
will happen. Thanks.
I didn't know that.
Yep.